Veteran single dad gives last $5 to a homeless woman. But what happens next will shatter everything you thought you knew. He's a struggling father, barely holding life together, choosing kindness even when he has nothing left. But then, the woman he helped does something unthinkable. She isn't homeless at all. She's a billionaire in disguise, with secrets powerful enough to change his life forever. From honor to betrayal to a chance at redemption, their worlds collide in ways neither saw coming. But when pride, faith, and love are all on the line, will a single father risk everything again, or lose the second chance he never expected? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The pale winter sun hadn't yet risen when Jack Reynolds opened his eyes. The familiar chill of his trailer's thin walls greeted him, along with the soft whirring of the ancient heater struggling to keep up with the December cold. He lay there for a moment, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, listening to the quiet creaks and groans of their modest home. With practiced movements, Jack eased himself up, his joints protesting more than usual in the cold. His old military injuries always acted up in weather like this. The metal floor was ice cold against his feet as he made his way to the tiny kitchen, careful not to wake Lily sleeping in the cramped bedroom just a few feet away. The coffee maker, a garage sale find from last summer, sat on the counter like an old friend. Jack went through the familiar motions: filter, grounds, water. The quiet gurgling of brewing coffee filled the small space, bringing a touch of comfort to the chilly morning. He opened the cupboard, wincing at its emptiness. A few scattered items remained: half a loaf of bread, some peanut butter, and a single pack of instant noodles. The refrigerator wasn't much better, holding only a carton of milk that was nearly empty. Jack's weathered hands reached for his wallet on the counter, though he already knew what he'd find. Opening it confirmed what he'd been dreading: a single $5 bill looking lonely and worn. He'd been putting off checking their bank account, knowing it would show pretty much the same story. The coffee maker sputtered its last drops just as Lily's alarm went off in the other room. Jack could hear her stirring, followed by the soft pad of her feet on the floor. She appeared in the doorway, wrapped in her favorite blanket, her long brown hair tousled from sleep. "Morning, Dad," she said with a sleepy smile that reminded him so much of her mother. "Morning, sweetheart." Jack poured coffee into 2 mugs, adding extra milk to Lily's, using up the last of it. "Did you sleep okay?" "Yeah, once I put on my extra sweater." Lily wrapped her hands around the warm mug, breathing in the steam. "The heater's making that funny noise again." Jack nodded, trying not to let his worry show. The heater was just one more thing on a long list of concerns. "We'll figure something out," he said, more to himself than to her. Lily watched him over the rim of her mug, her eyes too knowing for a teenager. "We always do, Dad." While Lily got ready for school, Jack checked the weather on their shared phone. Another bitter cold day ahead. He thought about the long walk Lily would have to make to the bus stop, and his stomach tightened. She needed a proper breakfast, something warm in her belly before facing the cold. "Hey, kiddo," he called out as she emerged from the bathroom dressed in layers of warm clothes. "What do you say we grab breakfast at Mel's Diner today?" Lily's face lit up for a moment before concern crossed her features. "Dad, we don't have to. I can just have some bread." No, Jack interrupted, forcing a smile. "It's Friday. We deserve a treat." He didn't mention it was also because they were almost out of food at home. His daughter was perceptive enough to probably know anyway. They stepped out of the trailer into the biting morning air. Jack's truck sat silent in the gravel driveway, unusable since the transmission had given out 2 weeks ago. Another repair bill they couldn't afford. The walk to Mel's wasn't far, but in this weather, every step felt longer. Lily chatted about her upcoming history test as they walked, her breath creating little clouds in the cold air. Jack listened, grateful for her resilient spirit. She never complained about their circumstances, even though he knew she deserved so much better. As they approached the diner, movement caught Jack's eye. A small figure sat huddled against the building's brick wall, nearly hidden in the shadows. As they got closer, he could make out more details. An elderly woman, wrapped in what looked like several thin jackets, holding a cardboard sign that read, "Anything helps. God bless." Jack's hand instinctively went to his wallet, feeling that lone $5 bill. His throat tightened. That money was supposed to be for Lily's breakfast. But looking at the woman, shivering in the early morning cold, he couldn't ignore the voice in his head, The same one that had guided him through his military service, that had helped him raise Lily alone after losing his wife. Lily had noticed his hesitation. She followed his gaze to the woman and squeezed his arm gently. That simple gesture, his daughter's understanding, made his decision clear. "Wait here a second, sweetheart," he said softly. Jack approached the woman slowly, noting how she seemed to shrink further into herself as he came closer. Her face was lined with age and hardship, her eyes carrying a weariness he recognized all too well. "Ma'am," he said gently, reaching into his wallet and pulling out the $5 bill. "Please, take this." The woman looked up, her eyes meeting his. In them, Jack saw something that made his chest tight. Dignity, despite circumstances. It was a look he'd seen in his own mirror, more times than he could count. Her weathered hands reached out slowly, accepting the money with trembling fingers. "God bless you," she whispered, her voice rough with emotion. Jack nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. As he turned back to Lily, he sent up a silent prayer, hoping that somehow they'd figure out their own breakfast situation. But looking at his daughter's proud smile, he knew he'd made the right choice. The bell above the diner's door chimed as Jack and Lily Reynolds stepped inside. Warmth wrapped around them like a welcome blanket, carrying the scents of coffee, bacon, and maple syrup. The familiar red vinyl booths and chrome-edged tables hadn't changed since Jack first started coming here years ago. "Morning, Jack." "Lily," Sarah, the regular morning waitress, called out from behind the counter. Her smile was genuine, crow's feet crinkling at the corners of her eyes. She'd watched Lily grow up over countless plates of pancakes and eggs. "Morning, Sarah," Jack replied, his voice carrying the weight of his empty wallet. Lily gave a small wave, her teenage frame swimming in the oversized winter coat they'd found at the thrift store last month. They slid into their usual booth by the window. The vinyl squeaked beneath them, and Jack noticed a small tear in the seat that hadn't been there last week. The morning regulars dotted the other tables. Mr. Peterson with his crossword puzzle, the Martinez couple sharing their usual breakfast special, and a few truckers warming up before hitting the road. "Just water for us today, Sarah," Jack said as she approached with her notepad. The words tasted bitter in his mouth. His daughter was hungry, and he couldn't even buy her breakfast. Lily's face fell slightly, but she quickly masked it with a smile. "That's okay, Dad. I'm not that hungry anyway." The lie was as transparent as the window beside them, but Jack appreciated her attempt to ease his guilt. Sarah's pen hovered over her notepad. "You sure? Usually, you two are all about the breakfast special on Saturday mornings." Jack's weathered hands fidgeted with the paper napkin in front of him. "Yeah, we're sure. Just water today." Lily reached across the table and placed her hand over his. Her fingers were still cold from outside, but her touch was warm with understanding. "Maybe we can make something at home later," she suggested, though they both knew the cupboards were nearly bare. Sarah nodded and walked away, leaving father and daughter in uncomfortable silence. Jack stared out the window, his mind wandering to the woman he'd given his last $5 to. He didn't regret it, couldn't regret it, but the reality of their situation weighed heavily on his shoulders. "Dad," Lily's voice pulled him back. "Remember what you always tell me about having faith?" Jack's lips curved into a small smile. Leave it to his daughter to throw his own wisdom back at him. "Yeah, sweetheart, I do." "Well, maybe this is one of those times we need to really believe it." The morning sun was streaming through the window now, catching the silver strands in Jack's dark hair. He watched as it painted golden highlights in Lily's brown hair, so much like her mother's had been. The sight made his heart ache with both love and worry. Sarah returned with their waters, placing them carefully on the table. She lingered for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "You know, Jack, I've been meaning to tell you, we're looking for someone to help with maintenance around here. Just part-time, but..." Jack straightened in his seat, pride warring with necessity. "Sarah, I appreciate it, but nothing." She cut him off gently. "Think about it, that's all I'm saying." As Sarah walked away, Lily squeezed his hand again. "She's right, Dad. It wouldn't be charity. You're good at fixing things." Jack nodded absently, his thoughts interrupted by the sight of their waitress returning, this time with 2 steaming plates of the breakfast special: eggs, bacon, hash browns, and toast. "Sarah, we didn't order." Jack started to protest. "Oh, these aren't from me," Sarah said, her face brightening as she set the plates down. "Someone already paid for your breakfast." Jack's brow furrowed in confusion. "Who?" "That nice lady who was sitting at the counter earlier. Said she wanted it to be a surprise." Sarah's smile widened. "She paid for coffee refills, too, so don't be shy about that." Lily's eyes lit up, looking from the food to her father's stunned expression. "See, Dad?" "Faith." Jack turned to look out the window, catching a glimpse of a familiar figure walking away from the diner. It was the same woman he'd given his last $5 to, but something about her walk seemed different now, more purposeful than before. She disappeared around the corner before he could get a better look. "Everything okay, Dad?" Lily asked, already reaching for a piece of crispy bacon. Jack looked at his daughter, then at the hot meal before them. The aroma of fresh coffee wafted up as Sarah filled their cups. "Yeah, sweetheart," he said softly. "Everything's okay." "Well, don't let it get cold," Sarah chimed in, giving them a knowing wink before heading off to tend to other customers. The first bite of eggs was perfect, hot and fluffy, just the way the diner always made them. Jack watched as Lily dug into her breakfast with teenage enthusiasm, her earlier claims of not being hungry forgotten. The morning sun continued to stream through the window, warming their little corner of the world. As they ate, the diner's usual Saturday morning buzz surrounded them. The clink of cutlery, the murmur of conversations, the sizzle from the kitchen, and the occasional laugh. It all felt surreal to Jack, this unexpected turn of events. He thought about the $5 he'd given away, and how it had somehow multiplied into this moment of comfort and sustenance. The food was exactly what they needed, but it was more than just the meal. It was the reminder that kindness could come full circle, that small acts of faith could lead to unexpected blessings. Jack savored each bite, grateful not just for the food, but for the lesson it was teaching his daughter about generosity and trust. Through the window, the morning sun painted the street outside in shades of gold, but the mysterious woman who had changed their morning was nowhere to be seen. Jack couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about her, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. But for now, he focused on the present moment, the warmth of the diner, the comfort of a good meal, and the smile on his daughter's face. The evening sun cast long shadows through the small windows of the Reynolds trailer. Jack sat at their worn kitchen table, sorting through a stack of bills with creased brows. The envelopes seemed to mock him with their bold red final notice stamps. He pushed them aside as Lily bustled around their tiny kitchen, humming while preparing mac and cheese for dinner. "You know, Dad," Lily said, stirring the pot with practiced movements, "what you did today was pretty amazing. Like something out of those superhero movies we used to watch." Jack looked up from the bills, managing a small smile. "It wasn't anything special, honey. Just trying to help someone who needed it more than we did." "But that's exactly what makes it special," Lily exclaimed, her eyes bright with admiration. "You gave away our last $5 to a complete stranger. Then boom, magic happens, and we get that amazing breakfast. It's like karma or something." "Or something," Jack echoed, his smile warming despite his worries. The memory of their unexpected breakfast was still fresh. Fluffy pancakes, crispy bacon, and eggs cooked just right. A meal they wouldn't have been able to afford after his impromptu act of charity. Lily set 2 steaming bowls on the table, the processed cheese smell filling their small living space. "My dad, the secret superhero. Should we get you a cape?" "I think my old military uniform will do just fine." Jack chuckled, but his eyes drifted back to the stack of bills. "The electric company wasn't going to accept good deeds as payment." "Hey." Lily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out. We always do." Jack squeezed back, marveling at his daughter's strength. At 16, she shouldered their struggles with a grace that sometimes made his heart ache. She shouldn't have to be so grown up already, shouldn't have to worry about money or see the strain in his eyes when bills came due. "You're right, kiddo. We always do." He picked up his fork, determined to focus on the present moment rather than tomorrow's worries. "How was school today?" Lily launched into a story about her chemistry class, her hands moving animatedly as she described an experiment gone wrong. Jack listened, letting her enthusiasm wash over him, grateful for these simple moments together. The mac and cheese was nearly gone when Lily's expression turned thoughtful. That lady today? The one you helped? There was something different about her, wasn't there? Jack paused, spoon halfway to his mouth. What do you mean? I don't know exactly. Just, the way she carried herself, maybe? And her eyes, they seemed too sharp, too aware for someone who'd been living rough. Sometimes Lily's perceptiveness surprised him. He'd noticed it too, something that didn't quite fit with the woman's apparent circumstances. But he'd learned long ago not to judge people by appearances. Life had a way of putting anyone in unexpected situations. Everyone has their story, he said finally. Whatever hers is, I hope that $5 helps somehow. Lily began gathering their empty bowls. Well, I think you're amazing, Dad. And not just for today. For everything. Jack felt his throat tighten. I'm the lucky one, kiddo. Having you as a daughter? Oh no. Lily groaned playfully. Please don't get sappy on me. Their laughter filled the small trailer, momentarily pushing away the shadow of unpaid bills and uncertain futures. Jack stood to help with the dishes, their familiar evening routine a comfort in its simplicity. The water was running in the sink when a knock echoed through the trailer. 3 precise taps that seemed to cut through the peaceful evening atmosphere. Jack and Lily exchanged glances. They rarely got visitors, especially after dark. Most of their neighbors kept to themselves, and any friends lived too far to drop by unannounced. Stay here, Jack said quietly, his military training surfacing in his careful movements. He approached the door, conscious of every creak in the trailer's old floor. Another knock came, just as measured as the first. Jack opened the door, and his words of greeting died in his throat. Standing on his small porch step was the woman from that morning. But the transformation was startling. Gone were the shabby clothes and desperate demeanor. Instead, she wore a tailored navy suit that spoke of quiet wealth, her silver hair neat and elegant. Her eyes, just as sharp as Lily had noticed, met his with calm assurance. The same woman who'd been sitting with a cardboard sign that morning now stood at his door looking like she'd stepped out of a corporate boardroom. Jack's mind struggled to make sense of the contradiction before him. Good evening, Mr. Reynolds, she said, her voice clear and cultured. I believe we met this morning. May I come in? We have much to discuss. Jack stared at the transformed woman standing at his door. Gone was the shabby coat and worn hat from this morning. Instead, she wore an elegant navy blue blazer and pearl earrings that caught the last rays of sunlight. Her silver hair was neatly styled, and her posture radiated quiet confidence. Mr. Reynolds, she said with a warm smile, I believe we met earlier today. May I come in? Jack glanced back at Lily, who had stopped stirring the pot and was watching with curious eyes. His military training made him naturally cautious, but something in the woman's gentle demeanor put him at ease. Of course, ma'am, he said, stepping aside, though I should warn you it's not much. The woman entered gracefully, seeming unbothered by the trailer's cramped quarters. Her eyes took in the neat but worn furniture, the carefully patched curtains, and the small collection of family photos on the wall. I'm Eleanor Whitmore, she introduced herself, extending her hand. And you must be Lily, she added, smiling at the teenager. Yes, ma'am, Lily replied, wiping her hands on a dish towel before shaking Eleanor's hand. Would you like some mac and cheese? I made extra. That's very kind of you, dear, Eleanor said, her eyes crinkling with genuine warmth. But I've already eaten. Please don't let me interrupt your dinner. Jack pulled out one of their mismatched chairs. Please, have a seat, Miss Whitmore. Can I offer you some coffee? Eleanor, please, she corrected gently. And coffee would be lovely. As Jack busied himself with the coffee maker, his mind raced. This woman had been sitting outside the diner in old clothes just this morning. Now here she was, looking like she'd stepped out of a business magazine. He had so many questions, but his military discipline kept him patient. Lily served herself some mac and cheese and sat down, her homework spread out on the far end of the table. She tried to appear focused on her textbook, but her eyes kept darting curiously between their visitor and her father. I imagine you're wondering about this morning, Eleanor said, accepting the steaming mug Jack offered her. She wrapped her elegant fingers around it, seeming to appreciate its warmth. The thought had crossed my mind, Jack admitted, taking his own seat. The chair creaked slightly under his weight. Eleanor took a careful sip of coffee before setting the mug down. I saw something remarkable today, Mr. Reynolds. A man with only $5 to his name gave it away to help a stranger. Jack shifted uncomfortably. Anyone would have done the same, no? Eleanor said firmly. They wouldn't, and we both know that. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a crisp $5 bill, placing it on the table. This is yours. Ma'am, Eleanor, that's not necessary, Jack protested. I didn't do it for— Of course you didn't, she interrupted gently. That's precisely why it matters so much. She paused, studying his face. You're a veteran, aren't you? Jack straightened slightly in his chair. Yes, ma'am. 20 years of service. I thought so. There's a certain bearing that never quite leaves. Eleanor's eyes moved to the small collection of medals displayed on a shelf. Distinguished Service Cross? Yes, ma'am. Lily looked up from her homework, pride shining in her eyes. Dad saved his whole unit, she said. But he never talks about it. Jack cleared his throat. Lily, it's all right, Eleanor said. Some things are harder to talk about than others. She took another sip of coffee. This is excellent, by the way. Thank you, Jack replied. But I still don't understand. This morning you were— Eleanor set down her mug and folded her hands on the table. Her expression became more serious, though her eyes remained kind. I suppose I owe you an explanation. She straightened her blazer, a gesture that seemed more habitual than necessary. The truth is, Mr. Reynolds, I'm not who I appeared to be this morning. I'm the founder and CEO of the Whitmore Foundation. Lily's pencil clattered to the table. Wait, the Whitmore Foundation? The one that built the new children's hospital downtown? Eleanor nodded, a slight smile playing at her lips. Among other things, yes. Jack's mind was racing. He'd heard of the Whitmore Foundation. Everyone in the city had. They were behind countless charitable initiatives, from veteran support programs to educational scholarships. But why? He started. Why was I sitting outside a diner dressed as a homeless woman? Eleanor finished for him. Her expression grew thoughtful. Several times a year I go undercover, you might say. I dress as someone society tends to overlook, and I observe. It helps me understand where help is most needed, and more importantly, it shows me who's willing to help even when they have almost nothing themselves. She reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a business card. I'm what the papers call a billionaire philanthropist, Mr. Reynolds, but all that wealth means nothing if it's not used to help people who truly deserve it. She placed the card on the table next to the $5 bill. And today, you proved yourself to be exactly the kind of person I look for. The trailer fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the heating unit. Jack stared at the business card, its elegant gold lettering catching the light. Lily had abandoned any pretense of doing homework and was watching the scene unfold with wide eyes. I'm not looking for charity, Miss Whitmore, Jack said finally, his voice firm but respectful. No, Eleanor agreed. You're not. You're the one who gives when he has nothing left to give. That's precisely why I'm here. She leaned forward slightly, her voice sincere. I'm not offering charity, Mr. Reynolds. I'm offering an opportunity. Jack's muscles tensed as he studied the elegantly dressed woman who just hours ago had been sitting on the cold pavement with a cardboard sign. His military training kicked in, eyes scanning for possible threats or signs of deception. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, ma'am, but I think you should leave. His voice was firm but polite, the same tone he'd used countless times during his service years. Please, Mr. Reynolds, let me explain. Eleanor's voice carried a gentle authority. I'm Eleanor Whitmore. You showed me extraordinary kindness this morning when you gave me your last $5. Jack positioned himself protectively between this stranger and the narrow hallway leading to Lily's room. Look, if this is some kind of scam— Dad? Lily appeared behind him, drawn by the voices. What's going on? Nothing, sweetheart. This lady was just leaving. Jack kept his eyes fixed on Eleanor. Eleanor pulled out a leather wallet, removing what looked like a business card and driver's license. I understand your skepticism, Mr. Reynolds. It's one of the qualities I admire. Here's my identification. Jack reluctantly took the items, studying them carefully. The driver's license showed the same face as the woman before him, and the business card was thick, expensive cardstock with raised lettering. Eleanor Whitmore, CEO, Whitmore Foundation. I still don't understand what this is about, Jack said, his voice gruff with suspicion. Dad, isn't that the same foundation that built the new Veterans Center downtown? Lily moved closer, her curiosity evident. Eleanor nodded. Your daughter's right. But more importantly, I'm the woman you helped this morning. I occasionally go undercover, you might say. I dress as someone in need and observe how people react. It helps me understand the real challenges people face and identifies those with genuine compassion. Jack's jaw tightened. So this was all some kind of test? Playing with people's emotions for your entertainment? Not entertainment, Mr. Reynolds. Research. Understanding. The way we treat those we think can't help us reveals our true character. Eleanor's eyes were kind but unwavering. And you, with only $5 to your name, chose to help someone you thought was in greater need. I don't need praise for doing what's right, Jack said stiffly. And I certainly don't need to be part of some social experiment. Lily touched his arm. Dad, maybe we should listen. No, Lily. Jack's voice was gentle but firm. I've seen enough schemes in my time. Rich people playing games with poor folks' lives. I'm not interested. Eleanor reached into her blazer pocket, making Jack tense again, but she only withdrew a small notebook. The meal at the diner wasn't charity, Mr. Reynolds. It was a thank you, but I'd like to discuss something more substantial. Please, Jack cut her off. I think you should go. Dad! Lily protested, but Jack raised his hand slightly. A gesture she knew meant the discussion was over. Eleanor studied them both for a moment, her expression thoughtful rather than offended. I understand, Mr. Reynolds. Trust is earned, not given. But I want you to know that what I saw this morning, a man willing to give his last dollar to help another, that's exactly the kind of person this world needs more of. She placed her business card on the small table near the door. It stood out starkly against the worn wood surface, like a piece of another world that had somehow drifted into their modest trailer. When you're ready to talk, call me. Anytime, day or night. Eleanor straightened her blazer. The foundation's number is on there, but I've written my personal cell on the back. And Mr. Reynolds? Jack met her gaze, his expression still guarded. Thank you again for the coffee this morning. It wasn't just the warmth of the drink that mattered. It was the warmth of the gesture. She turned toward the door, her movements graceful and unhurried. The morning sunlight filtered through the thin curtains of their trailer, catching dust motes in its pale beams. Jack stood at the kitchen counter, mechanically stirring his instant coffee while lost in thought about last night's bizarre encounter. The coffee had gone cold twice already, but he kept stirring, his mind replaying the strange woman's words over and over. Dad? Lily's voice broke through his reverie. She sat at their small fold-out table, picking at her bowl of cereal. Who was that lady who came by last night? Jack set down his coffee mug with a gentle thud. Nobody important, sweetheart. Just someone trying to sell something. The lie felt heavy on his tongue. But he didn't want Lily getting caught up in what had to be some kind of scam. Lily's spoon clinked against her bowl as she set it down. Dad, I heard her talking. She said she was rich and wanted to help us. Her brown eyes, so much like her mother's, fixed on him with that penetrating gaze that always made him feel transparent. Why would someone make that up? There are all kinds of people out there looking to take advantage of others, Jack said, his voice firm but gentle. Remember what I taught you about being careful with strangers? But she paid for our breakfast, Lily persisted. And she didn't look scary or mean. She looked kind. She pushed her cereal bowl away, half-eaten. I'm going to the library after school to work on my history project. Is that okay? Jack nodded, grateful for the change of subject. Of course. Just be home by dinner time. He picked up his coffee mug again, grimacing at the cold liquid inside. I will. Lily gathered her backpack, giving him a quick hug before heading to the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. Dad, sometimes good things do happen to good people. You're the one who taught me that. Before Jack could respond, she was gone, leaving him alone with his cold coffee and troubled thoughts. At the library that afternoon, Lily settled into one of the computer stations, her history textbook unopened beside her. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before typing, Eleanor Whitmore Philanthropist. The search results made her eyes go wide. Page after page of news articles, interviews, and photos filled the screen. She clicked on the first link, a recent profile in a business magazine. Eleanor Whitmore, dubbed the Silent Angel by those who know her work, has donated billions to charitable causes across the country. Lily read silently. Known for her innovative approach to philanthropy, Whitmore often works directly with communities in need, sometimes in disguise to better understand the challenges they face. Lily's heart began to race as she scrolled through photos. There she was, the same elegant woman who had stood in their trailer last night. Though, in these pictures, she wore expensive suits and stood in front of gleaming buildings with her name on them. The Whitmore Foundation for Veterans Affairs. The Whitmore Children's Hospital. The Whitmore Community Center. She clicked through more articles, reading about scholarship programs, housing initiatives, and veteran support services. Everything seemed to focus on helping people who were struggling, people just like her and her dad. Lily grabbed her phone and started taking pictures of the screen, making sure to capture the most important articles and photos. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, afraid someone might stop her or the computer might suddenly shut down. When she got home that evening, she found Jack sitting in his usual spot, staring at Eleanor's business card on the table. He looked up as she burst through the door, her cheeks flushed from running. "Dad, you need to see this." Lily pulled out her phone, nearly dropping it in her excitement. "She was telling the truth. Look." Jack's forehead creased with concern. "Lily, what are you talking about? Ms. Whitmore? Eleanor? The lady from last night?" Lily pulled up the photos she'd taken and thrust the phone into his hands. "She's real, Dad. She's exactly who she said she was." Jack's expression shifted from skepticism to confusion as he scrolled through the images. There were newspaper clippings, magazine articles, and photographs, all featuring the same woman who had stood in their trailer the night before. "See this one?" Lily leaned over his shoulder, pointing at a particular article. "It talks about how she sometimes goes undercover to find people who need help. That's exactly what she did with us." Her voice softened. "She saw you give away your last $5, Dad. She saw you help someone even when you had nothing to spare." Jack's hands trembled slightly as he continued to scroll through the evidence. There was no denying it. The woman who had appeared at their door was indeed Eleanor Whitmore, one of the country's most prominent philanthropists. "And look at this," Lily continued, reaching over to swipe to another article. "The Whitmore Foundation for Veterans Affairs. She helps veterans, Dad, just like you." Jack sat back in his chair, looking stunned. The business card on the table seemed to take on new significance as he processed everything Lily was showing him. His daughter watched him carefully, her eyes full of hope and expectation. "Why would someone like her?" Jack's voice trailed off as he shook his head in disbelief. "Because you're a good person," Lily said simply. "Because you helped her when you thought she was homeless, even though we barely have enough for ourselves." She placed her hand over his. "Maybe this is God answering our prayers, Dad. Maybe this is the help we've been waiting for." Jack stared at the phone, at the smiling face of Eleanor Whitmore in her professional photos, then at the simple business card on the table, the same card he'd been ready to throw away that morning, convinced it was worthless. Now it felt like the most valuable thing they owned. "I don't know, Lily," he said quietly. This is a lot to take in. Just promise me you'll think about it?" Lily squeezed his hand. "Promise me you won't let your pride stop you from at least hearing what she has to say?" Jack looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just the child he'd raised, but a young woman with wisdom beyond her years. He picked up Eleanor's business card, turning it over in his hands as if seeing it for the first time. Jack stared at Eleanor's business card on their kitchen counter, where it had sat untouched for 3 days. The elegant cream-colored paper looked out of place next to their chipped coffee mugs and worn placemats. His calloused fingers traced the embossed letters of her name, feeling the sharp contrast between the smooth paper and his rough skin. "Just call her, Dad," Lily said from the couch, where she was attempting to patch up a tear in her school backpack. "What's the worst that could happen?" Jack let out a heavy sigh. "There's always strings attached, sweetheart. Nothing in this world comes free." "Maybe," Lily replied, setting down her needle and thread. "But sometimes good things happen to good people. Isn't that what Mom always used to say?" The mention of his late wife made Jack's chest tighten. Sarah had always been the optimistic one, finding silver linings in the darkest clouds. He picked up his old flip phone, the one he kept because smartphone plans were too expensive, and looked at the number again. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Lily continued, her voice gentle. "It's just lunch, right? And I did show you all those articles about her foundation. She helps people, Dad. That's real. Jack's thumb hovered over the keypad. The military had taught him to trust his instincts, and right now they were sending mixed signals. Part of him wanted to tear up the card and forget this whole thing. But another part, the part that remembered Sarah's voice, wondered if this was an answer to their prayers. All right, he muttered more to himself than to Lily. His fingers moved stiffly as he dialed the number. The phone rang twice before a warm, professional voice answered. Eleanor Whitmore's office! Jack cleared his throat. This is Jack Reynolds. Mrs. Whitmore gave me this number. Ah, Mr. Reynolds. Yes, we've been hoping to hear from you. One moment, please. There was a brief silence. Then Eleanor's voice came through the line, as clear and confident as it had been in their trailer. Jack, I'm so glad you called. I was beginning to worry you'd thrown my card away. Almost did, he admitted, his honesty surprising himself. Eleanor's laugh was genuine. Your candor is refreshing. Are you and Lily free for lunch today? I'd love to show you both my home and discuss some ideas I have. Jack glanced at Lily, who was practically bouncing on the couch with anticipation. I suppose we could manage that. Wonderful. Do you have something to write with? I'll give you the address and gate code. As Eleanor rattled off directions to her estate, Jack scribbled them down on the back of an overdue electric bill. The address was in an area of town he'd only driven through when making deliveries to wealthy clients, a world away from their trailer park. My driver Thomas will meet you at the gate at noon. Is that enough time? Jack looked at his watch. 10:30 a.m. Yes, ma'am. That should work. After hanging up, he turned to find Lily already rushing to their tiny bathroom. I need to wash my hair, she called out. It's just lunch, Jack said, but he found himself checking his own reflection in the microwave door. His best button-down shirt had a small tear near the collar, but it was clean. He'd have to make do. The drive to Eleanor's estate took them through increasingly expensive neighborhoods. Jack's old pickup truck growled self-consciously, past manicured lawns and luxury cars. Lily pressed her face against the window, taking in the changing scenery. Look at those houses, Dad. They're like castles. Jack gripped the steering wheel tighter. Remember who you are, Lily. We don't need all this fancy stuff to be happy. I know, she said softly. But it's okay to dream a little, isn't it? The GPS guided them to a tall iron gate set into a stone wall that stretched as far as they could see in both directions. Jack pressed the intercom button, and a crisp voice responded immediately. Moments later, the gates swung open silently. A well-dressed man who must have been Thomas waited in a golf cart just inside. Mr. Reynolds? Miss Reynolds, if you'll follow me in your vehicle, please. They drove up a winding driveway bordered by perfectly trimmed hedges and flowering trees. Jack's truck felt increasingly out of place with each turn, until finally, they rounded a bend and saw Eleanor's home. Holy cow, Lily whispered. The mansion was a masterpiece of stone and glass, with sweeping windows that caught the midday sun. Fountains flanked the circular driveway, their spray creating tiny rainbows in the air. Several luxury cars sat parked near a separate garage structure that was bigger than their entire trailer park. Jack parked where Thomas indicated, then helped Lily out of the truck. She smoothed her simple dress, her church clothes, and tried to tame her wind-blown hair. Jack adjusted his shirt collar, wishing he'd had time to iron it properly. Remember your manners, he whispered to Lily, though she was usually better at social graces than he was. They followed Thomas up wide stone steps to massive wooden doors that looked like they belonged in a museum. Before Thomas could reach for them, they swung open, and Eleanor stood there beaming. She wore a simple but elegant blue dress that probably cost more than Jack's truck, but her smile was genuine and warm. Jack, Lily, I'm so happy you came. She stepped forward and took Lily's hands in hers. My dear, you look lovely. And Jack, thank you for giving me this chance. Jack nodded stiffly, fighting the urge to shrink back from the grandeur surrounding them. But Eleanor's next words surprised him. I know this must feel overwhelming, she said softly, gesturing at the mansion. But please remember, I invited you here because of who you are, not because of what you have or don't have. Kindness and integrity matter more to me than any of these material things. Lily squeezed Jack's hand, and he felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. Maybe, just maybe, this wasn't a mistake after all. Eleanor's dining room was larger than Jack and Lily's entire trailer. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, making the polished silverware sparkle. Jack shifted uncomfortably in his chair, feeling out of place in his cleanest but well-worn button-down shirt. Lily, seated beside him, couldn't stop staring at the crystal chandelier overhead. "Please, help yourselves," Eleanor said, gesturing to the spread before them. There was a steaming tureen of soup, fresh-baked rolls, and a platter of grilled chicken with roasted vegetables. "My chef makes the best butternut squash soup in the state." Jack watched as Lily carefully picked up what he hoped was the right spoon from the array beside her plate. His daughter had better manners than him. Her mother had made sure of that before she passed. "This is amazing," Lily said after her first spoonful, her eyes wide with delight. Eleanor smiled warmly. "I'm glad you like it." She turned her attention to Jack, who had barely touched his food. "Mr. Reynolds, I imagine you're wondering why I invited you here today." "The thought crossed my mind," Jack replied, his voice steady despite his nerves. Eleanor dabbed her lips with a napkin before continuing. "I run a charitable foundation that focuses on several causes, but one of our main initiatives is supporting veterans." She paused, studying Jack's reaction. "When I met you, even in my disguise, I saw something special. The way you gave your last $5 to help someone you thought was in need. That's the kind of character we look for." Jack's spoon stopped halfway to his mouth. "Look for?" "I'd like you to come work with us, Mr. Reynolds. We need someone who understands veterans' struggles firsthand. Someone who can connect with them, help coordinate our support programs, be a bridge between our foundation and the community we serve." Lily nearly knocked over her water glass in excitement. "Dad, that sounds perfect for you." Jack placed his spoon down carefully. "What exactly would this position entail?" "To start, you'd help us identify veterans in need and connect them with our resources, housing assistance, job training, medical care. Your military experience would be invaluable in building trust." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. "The salary is quite competitive, with full benefits. We'd also help with relocation to a more comfortable living situation." The soup suddenly felt thick in Jack's throat. He glanced at Lily, who was practically bouncing in her seat with hope, then back at Eleanor. "Ma'am, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but—" "Please," Eleanor interrupted gently. "Call me Eleanor." "Eleanor," Jack corrected himself. "I can't help feeling like this is charity." The word tasted bitter on his tongue. "Is that what you think this is?" Eleanor leaned forward, her expression serious. "Mr. Reynolds, I've built my foundation on identifying people of exceptional character and putting them in positions where they can help others. This isn't charity. It's an investment in both you and the veterans we serve." Jack's fingers drummed against the table's edge. "I've spent 20 years in the military, ma'am, Eleanor. I know what I'm good at, and it's not this." He gestured vaguely at the elegant surroundings. "Dad," Lily said softly, "remember what Mom used to say? Sometimes God answers prayers in unexpected ways." The mention of his late wife made Jack's chest tighten. She would have wanted this for them, a chance at a better life, an opportunity to help others. But his pride, the same pride that had kept him going through tough times, now felt like a wall he couldn't break through. Eleanor watched him thoughtfully. "You know, when I sat outside that diner, I saw dozens of people walk by. Some avoided looking at me entirely. Others tossed change without even meeting my eyes. But you looked at me like a human being. You gave everything you had, even though it meant going without yourself." She paused, letting her words sink in. "That's the kind of person we need." Jack straightened in his chair, his military bearing taking over. "I appreciate the offer, truly, but I've always believed in standing on my own 2 feet. I don't want handouts." Eleanor finished for him, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "I thought you might say that." She stood up and walked to a nearby credenza, returning with a folder. "Take this home. Look it over. The offer stands, and my door remains open when you're ready." Jack accepted the folder with slightly trembling hands, more affected by her words than he wanted to admit. "Thank you for lunch," he said formally, standing up. "Lily, it's time we headed home." Lily looked disappointed but rose obediently.
"Thank you for everything, Miss Whitmore. The soup was wonderful."
As they walked toward the door, Eleanor's voice followed them. "You know, Mr. Reynolds, sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is accept help when it's offered. Think about that. The afternoon sun beat down on Jack's shoulders as he walked out of Miller's auto shop, his third rejection of the day. The owner's words still echoed in his mind. Sorry, Jack. Business is slow. Can't afford extra hands right now. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with a threadbare handkerchief, his work boots scuffing against the cracked sidewalk. The walk home felt longer than usual. Each step weighted with disappointment. His old knee injury from his service days wasn't helping either, sending sharp twinges up his leg with every step. The trailer park came into view. Rows of mobile homes lined up like tired soldiers. Some had attempted cheerfulness, plastic flamingos or wind chimes, but most, like his, just showed their age. Their trailer sat at the end of the third row, its faded blue exterior peeling in places. The small American flag he'd mounted by the door hung limp in the still air. "Lily," he called out as he entered, the door's familiar squeak announcing his arrival. "I'm home." The inside of the trailer felt stuffy, despite the ancient window unit humming away. Lily sat at their small fold-out table, homework spread before her, but no plate in sight. Instead, a single plate of spaghetti waited at his usual spot. "Hey, Dad." She smiled up at him, but he noticed the quick way she shifted her papers to cover something. "How was your day?" Jack's eyes narrowed, catching the edge of what looked like their monthly budget worksheet underneath her textbook. "Where's your dinner, sweetheart?" "Oh, I already ate," Lily said quickly. Too quickly. She turned back to her math problems, pencil moving across the page. "Mrs. Martinez next door brought over some cookies earlier." Jack stood there, his throat tight. He knew that tone, the same one she'd used when she told him her old sneakers still fit fine last month, even though he could see her toes pressing against the front. The same tone when she'd insisted she didn't need new winter clothes because layering was in fashion. "Lily Reynolds," he said softly, using her full name. "Look at me." She glanced up, her green eyes, so like her mother's, meeting his. The pencil stopped moving. "The truth, please." Lily's shoulders slumped slightly. "I was looking at the budget while you were gone," she admitted. "We're behind on the electric bill, aren't we? And I saw how much groceries cost last week." She gestured to the lone plate of spaghetti. "I'm really not that hungry, Dad. You need it more. You were out all day." Jack's chest ached. He moved to the table, pulling out the other chair with a scrape against the linoleum floor. "When did you become the parent here?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Dad, I'm 15. I'm not blind." Lily pulled out the budget sheet she'd been hiding. "We're running out of savings, aren't we? And your knee's getting worse. I see you limping more." Jack stared at the plate of spaghetti, the sauce spread thin to make it look like more than it was. His daughter, his beautiful, brilliant daughter, had been rationing food without him noticing. The thought made him sick to his stomach. "This stops now," he said firmly, standing up. He went to the cabinet and pulled out another plate, dividing the spaghetti equally. "We eat together in this family. Always have, always will. But Dad, no buts." He set the plate in front of her, along with a fork. "Your job is to study, to grow, to be a kid. My job is to worry about the bills." Lily picked up her fork but didn't eat. "Then maybe it's time to let someone help with that job." Jack knew exactly what she meant. Eleanor's business card still sat on their counter, untouched for a week. He'd walked past it every morning, pretending not to see it. "This isn't about pride anymore," Lily continued softly. "Remember what you always told me about your unit? How you watched each other's backs?" "That was different," Jack protested, but his voice lacked conviction. "Why? Because it was in uniform?" Lily twirled spaghetti around her fork. "You taught me that being strong means knowing when to ask for help. That's what you said when I was struggling with algebra last year." Jack sat heavily in his chair, looking at his daughter. When had she gotten so wise? He remembered her as a toddler, all skinned knees and pigtails. Now she was here, teaching him his own lessons. The memory of Eleanor's words floated back. "This isn't charity, Jack. It's an opportunity to help other veterans while helping yourself." He'd been so quick to refuse, to see it as a handout rather than what it really was. A chance to make a difference, to provide for his daughter, to have purpose again. Lily reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "It's okay to need help sometimes, Dad. You taught me that too." Jack looked down at their joined hands, his weathered and calloused, hers still soft with youth. He thought about her skipping meals, about the unpaid bills, about the future she deserved but might never have if things stayed the same. Without a word, he stood up and walked to the counter. Eleanor's business card felt heavy in his hands as he picked it up. The cream-colored cardstock was elegant but simple, just like the woman herself. His fingers traced over the embossed letters of her foundation's name. Lily watched him, hope flickering in her eyes. Jack took a deep breath and reached for his phone. Sometimes, he realized, the bravest thing a soldier could do was admit he couldn't fight every battle alone. Jack adjusted his tie for the third time, feeling like it was strangling him. The crisp white shirt and dark suit Eleanor had arranged for him felt foreign against his skin, a far cry from his usual worn jeans and work shirts. He stood in front of Eleanor's foundation building, a sleek glass structure that stretched toward the morning sky. "You can do this," he muttered to himself, squaring his shoulders like he used to before military operations. The automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, welcoming him into a world that felt completely alien. The lobby buzzed with activity. Well-dressed professionals moved purposefully across the polished marble floor, their shoes clicking against the surface. A young woman at the reception desk looked up and smiled warmly. "Mr. Reynolds, we've been expecting you." She gestured to a man in a suit approaching from one of the hallways.
"This is David from HR. He'll get you started."
David extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Jack. Let's get your security badge sorted first." The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, signatures, and orientation procedures. Jack's head spun with information about parking passes, building access codes, and employee protocols. He nodded mechanically, trying to absorb it all. "And here's your uniform for driving duties," David said, handing him a garment bag. "Eleanor specifically requested you have several sets." Jack's fingers brushed against the expensive fabric. "This is too much," he started to say, but caught himself. He had promised Lily he would try to accept help gracefully. A gentle voice came from behind them. "Is everything too much, Jack?" He turned to find Eleanor standing there, elegant, as always, in a simple blue dress. Her eyes twinkled with amusement. "Ma'am," Jack said stiffly, then corrected himself when she raised an eyebrow.
"Eleanor, I mean, these uniforms must have cost—"
"Are exactly what my personal driver needs," she finished firmly. "Now, shall we begin your day? I have a board meeting across town in 40 minutes. Jack followed her to the underground parking garage, where a gleaming black town car waited. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the rear door for her, remembering his training from earlier. "You know," Eleanor said as he settled into the driver's seat, "most people would be more nervous about driving in city traffic than opening a car door." Jack's grip on the steering wheel relaxed slightly. "Ma'am Eleanor, I've driven convoys through Baghdad. Downtown traffic doesn't scare me." Her laugh was warm and genuine. "That's precisely why you're perfect for this job, Jack. You have perspective." Throughout the day, Jack shuttled Eleanor between meetings, charity events, and foundation business. He observed how she treated everyone with the same respect, from CEOs to custodial staff. Gradually, his rigid posture began to ease. During a brief break, he called Lily. "How's your first day at the new school, sweetheart?" "Dad, it's amazing." Her excitement bubbled through the phone. "They have an actual science lab, and the library is huge. Miss Thompson from the foundation showed me around during lunch." Jack blinked in surprise. "Miss Thompson?" "Eleanor arranged for her to be my student mentor. She's really nice, Dad. She helped me find all my classes and introduced me to some other kids." Before Jack could respond, Eleanor tapped on the window. Another meeting awaited. The afternoon stretched into evening. Jack found himself impressed by Eleanor's tireless dedication to her work. She reviewed proposals for veteran housing projects, discussed funding for medical programs, and planned upcoming charity events, all while moving between locations in the back of the car. "Last stop of the day," Eleanor announced as they pulled up to the foundation building. "There's something I'd like you to see." Inside, Jack heard familiar laughter floating down the hallway. They rounded the corner to find Lily sitting at a large table with several foundation staff members. Papers and textbooks were spread out before them, but they were all smiling and chatting while helping Lily with her homework. "The quadratic formula is easier if you think of it as a song," one young woman was saying, humming a tune that made Lily giggle. "And remember," added another staff member, "you can use the computer lab anytime you need to research projects. We're usually here late anyway." Jack stood frozen in the doorway, watching the scene unfold. His daughter looked so at home here, her face bright with enthusiasm as she worked through a math problem. The staff treated her not with pity or obligation, but with genuine warmth and interest. "Your daughter is quite remarkable," Eleanor said softly beside him. "She has your resilience, but she also has such an open heart. The team adores her already." Jack swallowed hard against the sudden tightness in his throat. For years, he had carried the weight of being everything for Lily. Father, mother, provider, protector. Watching her now, surrounded by people who seemed to genuinely care about her future, he felt something shift inside his chest. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice rough with emotion. Eleanor touched his arm lightly. "This is what community looks like, Jack. It's not charity or handouts. It's people helping people, the way you helped me that morning outside the diner." Lily looked up and spotted him then. "Dad, come see what we're working on. Did you know there's a whole scholarship program for military kids?" As Jack moved toward the table, returning the warm smiles of the staff members, he felt a small flicker of something he hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope, fragile but real, like a candle flame catching in the darkness. Maybe, just maybe, they had found more than just a job here. Maybe they had found a place to belong. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Eleanor's foundation parking lot as Jack pulled up in the sleek black sedan. His hands, calloused from years of manual labor, gripped the leather steering wheel with careful precision. After a week of driving Eleanor to various appointments, he was finally starting to feel less like an imposter in this new world. "Good morning, Jack," Eleanor said, sliding into the back seat with her usual grace. She wore a modest navy business suit, her silver hair neatly styled. "We have quite a schedule today. The Veterans Support Center first, then the downtown shelter board meeting." "Yes, ma'am," Jack replied, checking his mirrors before pulling away from the curb. He'd memorized the day's itinerary, just as he had every morning since starting this job. At the Veterans Support Center, Jack watched Eleanor move through the crowd with genuine warmth. Unlike other wealthy people he'd encountered, she didn't shy away from shaking hands or sitting beside homeless vets on worn plastic chairs. Her eyes held real interest as she listened to their stories. "Jack," Eleanor called, waving him over. "Come meet Thomas. He served in Afghanistan, too." Jack hesitated but joined them. Thomas, a young man with haunted eyes, looked up from his coffee cup. "3rd Infantry Division," Thomas said quietly. "1st Infantry," Jack responded, and something shifted in the air between them. Soon, they were deep in conversation about their experiences, the challenges of civilian life, and the struggles their families faced. Eleanor observed silently, her notebook open but forgotten in her lap. Jack almost forgot she was there until Thomas asked about the Foundation's housing assistance program. "Actually," Jack found himself saying, "many guys I knew struggled most with the paperwork. Maybe we could simplify the application process?" He caught himself and glanced at Eleanor, worried he'd overstepped, but Eleanor was nodding enthusiastically. "Excellent point, Jack. We'll discuss that at the next staff meeting." The pattern continued over the next few days. At each location, Jack noticed things his civilian colleagues missed. At the Family Support Center, he pointed out that many military spouses needed childcare during support group meetings. At the job training facility, he suggested extending evening hours for veterans working day shifts. During a lunch break between meetings, Eleanor's assistant Sarah brought them sandwiches in the car. "The shelter board was impressed with your suggestion about the weekend programs," she told Jack. He shrugged, still uncomfortable with praise. "Just speaking from experience. Weekends are the hardest when you're trying to get back on your feet. Too much time to think." Eleanor looked up from her phone. "That's exactly why your perspective is so valuable, Jack. You understand these challenges firsthand." At a veteran's mental health facility, Jack recognized the tension in a former Marine's shoulders, the way he positioned himself with his back to the wall. While others saw defensiveness, Jack saw hypervigilance. He quietly mentioned this to the staff psychologist, who adjusted her approach accordingly. "How did you know?" Eleanor asked later as they drove to their next appointment. "Been there," Jack said simply. "Sometimes the transition back is harder than the deployment itself." Eleanor made a note in her ever-present notebook. "Would you be willing to share more about that? It could help us improve our programs." Jack took a deep breath. Talking about his own struggles didn't come naturally, but if it could help others, "Yes, ma'am. I suppose I would." The week ended with a visit to a military family resource center. As Jack helped Eleanor from the car, she paused. "You've given us valuable insights this week, Jack. Things we would have missed without your experience." Jack shifted uncomfortably. "Just doing my job, ma'am." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "You're doing much more than that. Your understanding of what these families need, it's exactly what this foundation has been missing." Jack felt warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. It wasn't just pride. It was the realization that his struggles might have a purpose after all, that his experiences, painful as they were, could help others find their way back. "Thank you," Eleanor said softly, "for sharing your insights about military families. It means more than you know." Jack stood straighter, surprised by how much her words affected him. For the first time since starting this job, he felt like more than just a driver. He felt like someone whose opinion mattered. "Ready for the next stop?" he asked, opening her door. Eleanor smiled. "Lead the way, Jack. Lead the way." The Foundation's Learning Center buzzed with after-school activity. Through the large glass windows of Eleanor's office, Jack watched Lily sitting with a small group of teenagers, her hands moving animatedly as she explained something about their science project. Her eyes sparkled with excitement, a look he hadn't seen in years. "She's really flourishing here," Eleanor said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. She handed one to Jack, who accepted it with a quiet, "Thank you." "Yeah, she is," Jack replied, his voice a mixture of pride and uncertainty. He watched as one of the Foundation's tutors approached the group, offering guidance. The other kids treated Lily like she'd always been part of their circle despite her having joined the program just weeks ago. Lily looked up and caught his eye, giving him a bright wave. Jack waved back, his heart squeezing. She was wearing new clothes, nothing flashy, but certainly nicer than what they could afford before. The Foundation's education program had provided her with a laptop for schoolwork, and her backpack was filled with fresh supplies. "Something's bothering you about it, though," Eleanor observed, taking a sip of her coffee. Her keen eyes studied his face. Jack shifted uncomfortably. "It's not that I'm not grateful," he began, choosing his words carefully. "It's just, I worry about her getting used to all this." He gestured vaguely at the state-of-the-art facility around them. "The computers, the tutors, the nice clothes. What happens when?" "When what?" Eleanor prompted gently. "When it all goes away," Jack finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't provide this kind of life for her on my own. I don't want her to be disappointed later." Eleanor set her coffee down and turned to face him fully. "Jack, do you know what I see when I look at Lily?" Jack shook his head. "I see a girl who, despite having every reason to be bitter about life's hardships, chooses to be kind. Who shared her lunch with Sarah last week when the girl forgot hers. Who helped Tommy with his math even though she's still catching up herself." Eleanor's voice was warm but firm. "Those qualities? That's not about money or nice things. That's about having a father who taught her what really matters." Through the window, they watched as Lily helped another student who was struggling with their work. Her patience and gentle encouragement were clear, even from a distance. "But she's starting to talk about college now," Jack said, his throat tight. "Universities I could never afford, dreams that are way beyond what I can give her." "Why shouldn't she dream big?" Eleanor challenged. "Your daughter has both the intelligence and the character to go far. The only thing holding her back was opportunity, and that's something we can fix without changing who she is." Jack ran a hand through his graying hair. "I've seen what money does to people, Eleanor. In the military, I served with guys from wealthy families. Some of them, they looked down on everyone else, thought they were better. I don't want Lily to become like them," Eleanor finished. She looked thoughtful for a moment. "You know, when I first started this foundation, someone very wise told me that privilege becomes poison only when we forget where we came from." She smiled softly. "Lily won't forget, Jack. Not with you as her father." They watched as Lily gathered her things, the study session apparently over. She hugged one of her new friends goodbye and started walking toward them. "I promise you," Eleanor said quietly, "I don't want to change who Lily is. She's remarkable just as she is. What I want, what this foundation wants, is to give her the opportunities she deserves, to let her brilliant mind and generous heart reach their full potential." Jack swallowed hard, fighting back unexpected emotion. "I just don't want her to be disappointed if what? If she has to go back to having less?" Eleanor shook her head. Jack. The things that truly matter. The kindness, the work ethic, the integrity you've taught her. Those things can't be taken away. They're not dependent on bank accounts or fancy programs. Lily pushed open the office door, her cheeks flushed with excitement.
Dad, Miss Eleanor, we just finished our science project design. Want to see?
Before Jack could respond, she was pulling out detailed drawings and explaining concepts he barely understood. But what struck him most was how her eyes kept darting to him, seeking his approval and pride, just as they had when she was younger and would show him crayon drawings on scraps of paper. "That's impressive work, Lily," Eleanor said warmly. "Your team has really thought this through." "Thanks," Lily beamed.
Dad, is it okay if I stay late tomorrow? We want to start building the prototype, and Ms. Martinez said she'd help us.
Jack looked at his daughter. Really looked at her. She was still wearing her old sneakers, the ones she'd insisted on keeping, even when Eleanor's staff had offered new ones. Her hair was pulled back in the same simple ponytail she'd always worn. The sparkle in her eyes wasn't from expensive things. It was from the joy of learning, of creating, of being able to pursue her passions. "Of course you can stay," he said softly. Eleanor placed a gentle hand on Jack's shoulder. "She's still your Lily," she said quietly as the teenager hurried back to her friends to share the good news. "She's just getting the chance to become everything she was meant to be." Jack nodded, watching his daughter. Maybe Eleanor was right. Maybe it wasn't about changing who Lily was, but about letting her grow into who she could be. The mirror reflected a different man than Jack was used to seeing. His old military dress uniform, carefully altered by Eleanor's tailor, fit perfectly now. The slight shine on the shoulders had been expertly removed, the metals realigned, and the creases pressed sharp enough to cut paper. He adjusted his tie for the 10th time, his calloused fingers feeling clumsy against the sill. "Dad, you look amazing." Lily appeared in the doorway of their new apartment's bathroom, wearing a modest blue dress that Eleanor had helped her pick out. "Stop fidgeting with the tie. You're going to make it crooked." Jack dropped his hands to his sides, taking a deep breath. "I don't know about this, sweetheart. These fancy galas, they're not really our world." Lily stepped forward, straightening his tie with gentle hands. "Maybe they weren't before, but things are different now. You've been working with Eleanor for weeks, and you're doing great things at the foundation." A horn sounded outside. Eleanor's driver right on schedule. Jack grabbed his phone and wallet, tucking them into his inside pocket. The weight of the medals on his chest felt heavier than they had in years, each one a reminder of promises made and kept. The ride to the Grand Plaza Hotel was quiet, with Lily bouncing excitedly in her seat, while Jack stared out the window at the city lights. Eleanor had told him this was an important night for the foundation, with hundreds of potential donors attending. The thought made his stomach twist. "Mr. Reynolds," the driver announced, pulling up to the hotel's entrance.
"Mrs. Whitmore asked me to escort you to the side entrance. She's waiting there."
True to word, Eleanor stood by a discreet door, elegant in a classic black evening gown. Her face lit up when she saw them.
"Jack! Lily! You both look wonderful!"
She hugged Lily and squeezed Jack's arm warmly. "Are you ready?" "As I'll ever be," Jack managed, trying to smile. The ballroom took his breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over dozens of round tables draped in white linen. Flowers and candles created intimate islands of light, while a small orchestra played soft classical music from a corner stage. "This way," Eleanor guided them to a table near the front. "You'll be sitting with me." Jack noticed the careful way the other guests looked at them, some curious, others slightly dismissive. He recognized a few faces from news coverage: CEOs, politicians, old money families. Lily, however, seemed completely at ease, chatting with Eleanor about the decorations. "Jack," Eleanor said softly as they took their seats, "I know this isn't your comfort zone, but trust me, everyone here needs to hear what you have to say about our veterans programs." Before Jack could respond, servers appeared with the first course. He watched Lily carefully navigate the multiple forks with surprising grace, proud of how she handled herself. Throughout dinner, Eleanor introduced them to various guests, each conversation flowing more naturally than the last. "The military taught me structure," Jack found himself explaining to a curious senator, "but it didn't prepare me for civilian life. That's why the Foundation's transition programs are so vital." As coffee was served, Eleanor excused herself to prepare for her speech. The lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight illuminated the podium on stage. Eleanor stepped up, her presence commanding immediate attention. "Good evening, friends," she began, her voice warm but authoritative. "Tonight we're here to discuss the future of the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation, specifically our commitment to veterans and their families." Jack listened intently as she outlined statistics about veteran unemployment, homelessness, and the challenges of reintegration. His hands gripped his coffee cup tightly, remembering his own struggles. "But numbers only tell part of the story," Eleanor continued. "Tonight, I want to share something personal. A few months ago, I conducted one of my, let's call them, field research moments." Gentle laughter rippled through the crowd. "I sat outside a diner, dressed as a homeless woman, watching people pass by. Most avoided eye contact. Some muttered excuses. Then a man approached, a proud veteran who had barely $5 to his name." Jack's breath caught in his throat. Lily reached under the table and squeezed his hand. "This man, without hesitation, gave me his last $5. He didn't know who I was. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do." Eleanor's voice grew passionate. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to meet that man, Jack Reynolds. Would you please stand?" The spotlight found him, and Jack slowly rose to his feet, his military training keeping his posture straight despite his racing heart. The medals on his chest caught the light. "Jack Reynolds represents everything our foundation stands for," Eleanor declared. "Integrity, compassion, and unwavering dedication to serving others. Over the past weeks, he has become an invaluable part of our team, bringing insight and heart to our veterans programs. Tonight, I'm honored to announce that Jack will be the new face of our National Veteran Initiative, helping us expand our support programs across the country." The ballroom erupted in applause. Jack stood perfectly still, overwhelmed by the moment. Next to him, Lily wiped happy tears from her eyes. Around the room, people began rising to their feet, the applause growing stronger. Eleanor beamed from the stage, her eyes meeting Jack's with warmth and respect. The standing ovation continued, echoing off the ornate ceiling, but Jack barely heard it. In that moment, all he could think about was how far they'd come from that cold morning outside the diner, and how sometimes the smallest act of kindness could change everything. The sleek black car glided through the city's nighttime streets, its interior warmly lit by the passing streetlights. Jack sat in the back seat with Lily for once, while Eleanor's regular evening driver took them home. His daughter's head rested against his shoulder, her formal dress slightly wrinkled from the long evening, but her smile remained bright. "Dad," Lily whispered, "you looked amazing up there, like a real hero." Jack's chest tightened with emotion. He glanced down at his polished dress shoes, still processing the events of the evening. The standing ovation still echoed in his ears, and Eleanor's words of praise felt almost surreal. "It felt good," he admitted quietly, running a hand over his freshly trimmed hair. "Haven't felt anything like that since my military days." The car turned onto their street, where their new apartment building stood, a modest but clean complex that was worlds away from their old trailer. Lily sat up straighter, her eyes shining in the darkness. "Miss Eleanor really believes in you, Dad. Everyone does. Did you see how many veterans came up to shake your hand after the speech?" Jack nodded, remembering the weathered faces of fellow servicemen who had approached him. Their firm handshakes and knowing looks had meant more than any applause. "Those men understand what it's like," he said. "Coming back home, trying to find your place again." The driver pulled up to their building, but before they got out, Jack turned to his daughter. "Lily, I need to tell you something." He took a deep breath. "For the longest time, I thought I was failing you, not being able to provide the way your mother and I had planned." "Dad, don't," Lily started, but Jack gently continued. "Let me finish, sweetheart. Tonight was the first time in years I felt like I could look in the mirror and see someone worthy of being your father. Someone who might actually make a difference again." Lily threw her arms around him, nearly knocking him against the car door. "You've always been worthy," she said fiercely. "Always." They made their way up to their apartment, both tired but happy. Jack hung his uniform carefully in the closet, a far cry from the cardboard box where it had been stored in the trailer. He could hear Lily humming in her room as she got ready for bed, a sound that reminded him of her mother. The next morning dawned bright and clear. Jack was up early, as usual, making coffee in their small but functional kitchen. The morning paper lay on their welcome mat, delivered daily now that they had a proper address. He picked it up, expecting to see coverage of Eleanor's gala. The headline hit him like a physical blow. Homeless vet cashes in. Local man takes advantage of Eleanor Whitmore's fortune. Jack's hands trembled as he read further. The article painted him as a calculated opportunist who had manipulated Eleanor's well-known charitable nature. It quoted anonymous sources claiming he had orchestrated their first meeting, deliberately placing himself outside that diner to trap Eleanor in her own compassion test. Worse were the implications about Lily, suggesting he was using his daughter to play on Eleanor's emotions. The article even dredged up his struggles after returning from service. The odd jobs, the missed payments, the times they'd had to move suddenly in the night. The coffee pot beeped cheerfully behind him, a jarring contrast to the sick feeling in his stomach. He heard Lily's bedroom door open and quickly folded the paper, shoving it under some mail on the counter. "Morning, Dad." Lily bounced into the kitchen, still riding high from last night's events. "Can we stop by the foundation today? Miss Eleanor said she might have some old books from her library that I could borrow." Jack forced a smile, pouring her a glass of orange juice. "Maybe another time, sweetheart. I've got some errands to run today." But Lily knew him too well. She tilted her head, studying his face. "What's wrong? You look like you did when we got the eviction notice from the trailer park." Before Jack could answer, his phone buzzed. Text messages started rolling in. Other veterans from the foundation, friends he'd made over the past weeks. Each notification made his heart sink further, knowing they'd probably seen the article too. "Dad." Lily's voice had lost its morning cheerfulness. She moved toward the counter where the edge of the newspaper poked out from under the mail. Jack reached for it too late. Lily pulled it free, her eyes widening as she read the headline. Her face, so full of joy just moments ago, crumpled with hurt and anger. "This is lies!" she exclaimed, hands gripping the paper so tight it crinkled. "How can they write this? Everyone knows how hard you work, how much you care about helping other veterans." Jack gently took the paper from her hands. "Some people," he said carefully, "will always try to tear down others when they start to rise." The words felt hollow, though, as his own doubts crept in. Had he taken advantage of Eleanor's kindness? Had he let his pride blind him to how this might look to others? His phone buzzed again. Eleanor's name appeared on the screen. Jack stared at it, his thumb hovering over the answer button. The thought of facing her now, of hearing disappointment in her voice, made his stomach churn. "You have to answer it," Lily insisted, watching him. "Miss Eleanor will know it's not true. She'll help fix this." But Jack's military training had taught him that retreat was sometimes necessary to regroup and assess. He silenced the phone and placed it face down on the counter. "Dad, no," Lily protested, understanding dawning on her face. "Don't do this. Don't pull away like you always do when things get hard." The morning sun streamed through their kitchen window, catching the edges of the newspaper where it lay between them. Jack stared at it, seeing not just today's headline but the shadow of every struggle, every setback, every time he'd thought he was finally getting ahead only to be knocked back down. "I need some time to think," he said quietly, more to himself than to Lily. The respect he'd felt last night seemed to evaporate like morning dew, leaving behind only the familiar weight of shame and uncertainty. Lily stood there in her pajamas, looking suddenly much older than her years. She picked up the paper one more time, read the headline again, and then did something that surprised them both. She ripped it in half. "I won't let them do this to us," she declared, her voice shaking but determined. "Not after everything we've been through." But Jack could already feel the walls going up, the old instinct to protect himself by withdrawing. The warmth and promise of the previous evening felt like a distant dream, replaced by the cold reality of the morning's accusations. Jack tried to go about his day normally, but the whispers followed him everywhere. At the local coffee shop where he used to grab his morning brew, the barista, who had always been friendly now, barely met his eyes. She slid his coffee across the counter without her usual cheerful conversation. Outside on the street, he caught fragments of conversations that stopped abruptly when he passed. A group of mothers pulling their children closer, their eyes darting away when he looked in their direction. The neighborhood he'd started to feel at home in suddenly felt hostile. His phone kept buzzing with notifications. More news outlets had picked up the story, spinning it into increasingly sensational headlines. "Veteran cons billionaire," one read. Another questioned his military record, suggesting he might have exaggerated his service. Each new alert felt like a physical blow. Back at his apartment, Jack sat at his small kitchen table, scrolling through the comments on the articles. People he'd never met dissected his life, making assumptions about his character. Some even posted pictures of him and Lily from the gala, questioning how a supposedly struggling veteran could afford such nice clothes. "They're just jealous," Lily insisted, watching him from across the table. "You earned everything you have now. Miss Eleanor knows that." But the damage was spreading. His old supervisor from the auto shop, who had initially been supportive of his new position, posted a vague comment about always knowing something wasn't right about that guy. Former co-workers chimed in, sharing stories that painted his quiet nature as suspicious and his pride as arrogance. The foundation's social media pages were flooded with negative comments. People questioned Eleanor's judgment, suggesting she had been deceived by a professional con artist. Some even speculated about inappropriate relationships, turning their friendship into something tawdry and false. Jack's hands shook as he closed the browser. He'd faced enemy fire without flinching, but these invisible attacks left him feeling exposed and vulnerable. The weight of public scrutiny pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. That afternoon he tried to drive to the foundation office, but found himself sitting in the parking lot, unable to get out of the car. Through the windows he could see the staff moving about their day. Would they look at him differently now? Would they wonder if the articles were right? His phone rang again, Eleanor's fifth call of the day. Each time he'd let it go to voicemail, unable to face her. Her messages were supportive, insisting they would fight these accusations together. But Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was becoming a liability to everything she'd built. When he finally gathered the courage to enter the building, the usual warm greetings from staff members were replaced with awkward nods and averted gazes. He overheard two volunteers whispering near the water cooler, their conversation cutting off abruptly when they noticed him. In his small office, Jack found a stack of hate mail that had somehow made it past the front desk. Letters accused him of being a fraud, a disgrace to the uniform, a man who would use his own daughter to con a kind-hearted philanthropist. One envelope contained nothing but a torn military photo with the word shame written across it. The final straw came when he opened his email to find a message from Lily's school. Parents had complained about their children associating with the daughter of someone under such scrutiny. The administration suggested it might be better for everyone if Lily took some time away from her new after-school programs. Jack sat back in his chair, the email blurring before his eyes. He'd survived war, poverty, and the loss of his wife, but seeing his daughter suffer for his choices was unbearable. The thought of Lily facing whispers and judgment, losing the opportunities she'd just begun to enjoy, it was too much. With heavy steps, he made his way to Eleanor's office. Her assistant tried to stop him, saying she was in a meeting with her PR team, but Jack walked past her. He knew what he had to do. Eleanor looked up as he entered, her face lighting with relief. "Jack, I've been trying to reach you. We're already working on a response to these ridiculous allegations." "I'm resigning," Jack interrupted, his voice rough but firm. Effective immediately, Eleanor stood up, waving off her PR team. "Don't be absurd. We can fight this. These accusations are baseless." "It doesn't matter if they're true or not," Jack said, pulling his foundation ID from his pocket. "The damage is done. Every day I stay here, your reputation suffers. The foundation's work suffers." He placed the ID on her desk. "I won't be the reason your good name gets dragged through the mud." "Jack, please." Eleanor stepped around her desk, reaching for his arm. "You're letting pride cloud your judgment. Think about Lily." "I am thinking about Lily," he cut in, stepping back. "She deserves better than watching her father destroy everything you've built. Better than having her name smeared in the papers. Better than losing her new friends because their parents think her dad is a con man." Eleanor's face softened with understanding and sadness. "You're a good man, Jack Reynolds. One of the best I've ever known. Don't let these people drive you away from the work you were meant to do." Jack straightened his shoulders, falling back on his military bearing. "Thank you for everything you've done for us, Miss Whitmore." "I'm sorry I couldn't be what you hoped." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Please, take care of yourself. Don't let anyone else take advantage of your kindness." Before Eleanor could respond, he walked out, past the startled PR team, past the whispering staff members, past the front desk where he'd first felt welcome. Each step felt like lead, but he forced himself to keep moving. Just as he had on long marches during his service, in his car, Jack sat for a long moment, staring at the foundation building. Through the windows, he could see Eleanor talking animatedly to her team, probably already trying to find a way to fix this. But some things couldn't be fixed. Sometimes, the only honorable choice was to walk away. He started the engine, his resignation letter heavy in his pocket. It would be delivered to HR in the morning, along with his keys and parking pass. As he pulled out of the parking lot, he caught a glimpse of his reflection in the rearview mirror. The man looking back at him seemed older somehow, weighted down by more than just years. His phone buzzed one final time, another message from Eleanor. This time, he turned the phone off completely. Whatever she had to say, it wouldn't change his decision. He'd learned long ago that sometimes the best way to protect the people you care about is to remove yourself from their lives. The drive home felt longer than usual, each familiar landmark now tainted with whispers and judgment. The life he'd started to build, the respect he'd begun to feel. It had all crumbled like a house of cards in the wind of public opinion. The autumn chill crept through the thin walls of their trailer as Jack pulled on his worn work boots. His muscles ached from yesterday's construction job, but he couldn't afford to rest. The mounting bills on the kitchen counter reminded him of that harsh reality. "Dad, you're being ridiculous," Lily said from the doorway of her tiny bedroom. She stood with her arms crossed, still in her pajamas, her face pinched with worry. "Eleanor keeps calling. She wants to help." "We've talked about this, sweetheart." Jack's voice was tired but firm. "We managed before, and we'll manage now." "But we don't have to," Lily's voice cracked. "Why are you letting some stupid newspaper article ruin everything?" Jack paused, his weathered hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. The memory of those headlines still made his stomach turn. "It's not just about the article. I won't have people thinking I'm taking advantage of that woman's kindness. Nobody who matters thinks that." Lily grabbed her backpack with more force than necessary. "Miss Eleanor doesn't think that. Her staff doesn't think that." "I don't think that." Jack watched as his daughter stormed out, slamming the trailer door behind her. The whole structure shook slightly, and something inside him shook too. The next few weeks blurred together in a parade of temporary jobs. Monday was landscaping work. Tuesday and Wednesday, he helped clean out foreclosed homes. Thursday brought a short stint at a moving company, where his old war injury flared up after lifting too many heavy boxes. Every evening, he came home to find Lily more withdrawn. She'd stopped telling him about her day, stopped sharing her dreams about college and the future. The light that had bloomed in her during their time with Eleanor's foundation seemed to dim with each passing day. One afternoon, while painting a stranger's fence, Jack overheard his client talking on the phone. Yes, that's right. The veteran who was working with Eleanor Whitmore. "Such a shame. My friend at the country club says he was just after her money." Jack's brushstrokes became mechanical as he tried to block out the words. His jaw clenched so tight it hurt. That evening, he found Lily sitting at their small kitchen table, homework spread out before her, but she wasn't studying. Instead, she was looking at photos on her phone. Pictures from the gala, of her with Eleanor's staff, of Jack receiving that standing ovation. "I missed them," she said quietly, not looking up. "I miss feeling like we belonged somewhere." "Lily," Jack started, but she cut him off. "No, Dad. You taught me that being honorable means standing up for what's right. But you're not standing up for anything. You're running away." She wiped at her eyes angrily. "Eleanor gave us a chance to help other veterans, other families like ours. But you're so worried about what some stupid rich people think that you're forgetting about all the good we could do." Her words hit him like a physical blow. She gathered her books and retreated to her room, leaving Jack alone with thoughts he'd been trying to avoid. The next day, he picked up work at the local junkyard. As he sorted through scrap metal, his phone buzzed. Another text from Eleanor. "The Veterans Program needs you, Jack. These families need someone who understands their struggles." He deleted it, just like all the others. That evening, after Lily had gone to bed, Jack sat at the kitchen table. The single overhead light cast harsh shadows across the bills scattered before him. His latest paycheck wouldn't cover even half of what they owed. In the quiet of the night, he pulled out his wallet. Behind his driver's license, carefully preserved, was Eleanor's business card, the one she'd left that very first night. The elegant white cardstock seemed to mock him with its simplicity. Just a name, a number, and an address that had briefly felt like home. He ran his thumb over the embossed letters, remembering the warmth in Eleanor's eyes when she'd praised his integrity at the gala. The pride in Lily's face as she watched him help coordinate veteran support programs. The feeling of purpose that had filled his chest every morning when he walked into the foundation's offices. The card grew blurry as he stared at it, and he realized his eyes had welled up with tears. In the stillness of their humble trailer, with only the hum of the ancient refrigerator for company, Jack Reynolds sat alone at his kitchen table, holding a simple business card that represented everything he'd given up and everything he could still reclaim, if only he found the courage to try. The autumn chill crept through the thin walls of their trailer as Jack sat at the kitchen table, staring at Eleanor's business card. The cheap overhead light flickered, casting unsteady shadows across the mounting pile of bills. His calloused fingers traced the elegant lettering on the card, remembering how different things had felt just weeks ago. "Dad." Lily's voice was firm as she stood in the doorway of her small bedroom, still in her pajamas. "We need to talk." Jack quickly tucked the card away. "It's late, sweetheart. You should be sleeping." "No." Lily moved to the table and sat down across from him. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, held a determination that made Jack's heart ache. "I've watched you throw away everything good in our lives because of what some stupid newspaper said. This has to stop." "Lily, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." She reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "You taught me about honor, remember? About standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. But Dad, running away isn't honorable. It's just scared." Jack felt his jaw tighten. "I'm protecting us. Protecting Eleanor's foundation." "From what?" Lily's voice cracked slightly. "From people who don't even know you? From lies?" She squeezed his hand harder. "You always told me that real courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing the right thing, even when you are afraid." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. He'd said those exact words to Lily years ago, after she'd stood up to a bully at school. Now they were coming back to him, weighted with a truth he'd been trying to avoid. "The foundation was helping so many veterans," Lily continued, her voice softening. "Remember Mr. Martinez? He cried when you helped him get his medication sorted out. And Mrs. Peterson? Her son finally got the counseling he needed because of you." Jack's throat tightened as he remembered the faces of the veterans he'd helped. The way their eyes had lit up when they realized someone actually understood what they were going through. Someone who'd been there. "And what about Faith?" Lily pressed on. "You gave your last $5 to Eleanor when she was pretending to be homeless. You told me God would provide, and He did. He sent us Eleanor. But now you're throwing away His blessing because you're too proud to fight back against lies?" The kitchen fell silent, except for the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Jack could feel tears burning behind his eyes, but he blinked them back. "I saw how happy you were," Lily whispered. "For the first time since Mom died, you were really happy. You were making a difference. And Eleanor, she believes in you, Dad. She sees what I see." "And what's that?" Jack's voice was barely audible. "A good man. A brave man. Someone who deserves every bit of trust Eleanor put in him." Lily stood up and moved around the table, wrapping her arms around her father's shoulders. "But right now you're not being that man. You're letting fear win." Jack's shoulders began to shake. All the emotions he'd been holding back, the shame, the fear, the crushing weight of feeling unworthy finally broke through. "I don't deserve it," he whispered, his voice rough with unshed tears. "All that trust Eleanor put in me, all that responsibility, I'm just a broken-down veteran living in a trailer. What right do I have to stand next to someone like her?" "You have every right," Lily said firmly, "because she chose you, not for your money or your status, but for your heart, for exactly who you are." Jack turned in his chair and pulled his daughter into a proper hug, no longer trying to hide his tears. "When did you get so wise?" "I learned from you," Lily said, her own voice thick with emotion. "All those lessons about honor and courage and faith. I was listening. Maybe it's time you started listening to them again, too." They sat there in the dim kitchen light, father and daughter holding each other as Jack's walls finally crumbled. Years of carrying everything alone, of trying to be strong for everyone else, of feeling like he wasn't enough, it all came pouring out. "I'm scared," he admitted, the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "Scared of letting Eleanor down. Scared of failing. Scared of losing everything again." "I know," Lily soothed, running her hand over his back like he used to do for her when she was little. But you taught me that's when faith matters most. When we're scared, when we don't know what's coming next. Jack pulled back slightly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. Eleanor trusted me with so much, he said, his voice breaking. Her reputation, her foundation, her friendship. And at the first sign of trouble, I ran. What kind of man does that make me? A human one, Lily answered simply. But it's not too late to make it right. Jack looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the strength and wisdom that had grown in her, even through all their hardships. Maybe it was time to learn from her, just as she had learned from him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Eleanor's business card again, running his thumb over the raised letters. I don't deserve her trust, he whispered, the admission feeling like both a weight and a release. But maybe I can earn it back. Lily smiled softly, hope shining in her eyes. That sounds like my dad talking, the real one, the brave one. Eleanor Whitmore sat in her mahogany-paneled office, surrounded by stacks of documents and news clippings. Her usually tidy desk was covered with paper trails and financial records. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor as she pieced together a disturbing puzzle. Ms. Whitmore, her assistant Sarah knocked softly before entering. I have that information you requested about Thomas Blackwood. Eleanor looked up from her work, her reading glasses perched on the edge of her nose. What did you find? Sarah placed a thick folder on the desk. It's all here. Mr. Blackwood has been trying to undermine your foundation's work for months. He's the majority owner of several private prison contracts, and your veteran rehabilitation programs have been cutting into his profits. Of course, Eleanor muttered, opening the folder. Follow the money. Her eyes scanned document after document, revealing a pattern of calculated attacks. Blackwood had hired a PR firm specializing in smear campaigns, targeting not just Jack, but several of her foundation's initiatives. Eleanor's phone buzzed. Another message from Jack remained unanswered. She missed his steady presence, his honest insights about the veterans they help. The foundation staff wasn't the same without him. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of loss that went beyond just losing a colleague. Sarah, get me everything we have on Blackwood's prison contracts, and call Marcus at the Times. It's time we shared some truth of our own. For the next several hours, Eleanor and her team worked tirelessly. They uncovered doctored photographs, paid sources who had never met Jack, and a web of false accusations designed to discredit him. Each piece of evidence made Eleanor's blood boil, but also strengthened her resolve. Look at this. Her investigator pointed to a series of bank transfers. Blackwood paid off 3 different tabloids to run the initial stories. Once those were out, legitimate papers picked up the scandal angle. Eleanor's lips pressed into a thin line. And Jack, being Jack, walked away rather than fight back. He probably thought he was protecting the foundation. She stood up, gathering key documents into her briefcase. The autumn afternoon was fading into evening, casting long shadows across her office. Her driver waited outside, but this time she knew exactly where she needed to go. Cancel my evening appointments, she told Sarah, and get me Jack's current address. The trailer park? Sarah confirmed. But, Ms. Whitmore, you have the charity board meeting? The board can wait. Eleanor's voice was firm. I've let this go on long enough. The drive to Jack's neighborhood felt longer than before. Eleanor watched the changing landscape through her window. From manicured lawns to increasingly modest homes, finally arriving at the familiar trailer park. Her heart ached, thinking of Jack and Lily returning to this struggle after having a taste of stability. She spotted Jack's old truck parked outside his trailer, its paint peeling worse than she remembered. A single light glowed from inside, and Eleanor gathered her courage along with her evidence. She'd faced down corporate boards and government officials, but this conversation felt more crucial than any of those. Eleanor stepped carefully along the gravel path, her heels unsuited for the terrain. The evening air was getting cooler, and she pulled her jacket closer. Reaching the trailer's door, she took a deep breath and knocked firmly. There was movement inside, then silence. She knocked again. Jack Reynolds, she called out, loud enough to be heard through the thin walls. I know you're in there and I'm not leaving until we talk. More silence, then slow footsteps. The door creaked open, revealing Jack's surprised face. He looked tired, older than when she'd last seen him, but his eyes still held that same dignity she'd first noticed months ago. Miss Whitmore, he said formally, as if they were strangers. This isn't necessary. Oh, but it is. She held up her briefcase. I have proof, Jack. Proof that everything written about you was a lie, orchestrated by a man named Thomas Blackwood. He's been trying to destroy my foundation's work with veterans, and he used you to do it. Jack's expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes, a mix of relief and lingering doubt. That's kind of you, he said carefully. But no buts. Eleanor stepped forward, almost daring him to close the door on her. You're coming with me right now. There's a veterans event downtown where Mr. Blackwood is speaking about rehabilitation programs. I think it's time we showed him, and everyone else, what real integrity looks like. She saw the war playing out on his face, pride wrestling with truth, honor grappling with redemption. Behind him, she caught a glimpse of the sparse trailer interior, so different from the life he and Lily had begun to build. Jack, she said more softly, you taught Lily about courage and standing up for what's right. Now it's time to show her what that looks like. His hand tightened on the door frame, and Eleanor held her breath. Everything hinged on this moment. Not just Jack's future, but the lives of countless veterans they could help together. She waited, briefcase in hand, ready to fight for the man who had once given his last $5 to a stranger in need. 20 minutes, he finally said, his voice rough. I need to change into something more presentable. Eleanor smiled, relief flooding through her. Take your time. I'll be right here. The grand ballroom of the Veterans Memorial Center buzzed with activity as reporters and photographers jostled for position. Jack stood backstage, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. The same tie he'd worn to the gala where everything had seemed so perfect before it all fell apart. Dad, you look fine, Lily whispered, reaching up to straighten his collar. Her eyes sparkled with pride, though Jack could see worry lurking beneath her brave smile. Eleanor appeared beside them, dressed in a simple but elegant navy suit. Her presence carried authority, but there was something else too, determination etched across her face. Are you ready, Jack? He swallowed hard. Eleanor, you don't have to do this. My reputation isn't worth— Stop right there. Eleanor cut him off gently. This isn't just about you anymore. This is about every veteran who needs help but might hesitate to reach out because of these lies. This is about showing that goodness and integrity still matter. Jack nodded, his throat tight. Through the curtain, he could hear the murmur of voices growing louder. Eleanor's assistant handed her a leather portfolio. It's time, she said softly. They walked onto the stage together, Eleanor leading, Jack and Lily following a few steps behind. Camera flashes erupted like lightning. Jack felt exposed under the harsh lights, but he kept his back straight, the way he'd learned in the military. Eleanor approached the podium, her voice clear and strong over the microphone. Thank you all for coming. 2 weeks ago, accusations were made against Jack Reynolds, a man who has become integral to our foundation's veteran outreach program. Today, I'm here to set the record straight. She opened the portfolio, removing several documents. These papers prove that the accusations against Jack Reynolds were fabricated by Marcus Wellington, CEO of Wellington Industries. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Mr. Wellington has been attempting to undermine our foundation's work for years, particularly our veteran support initiatives, which compete with his own tax shelter schemes. Eleanor held up email printouts. We have evidence of Mr. Wellington paying journalists to plant false stories. We have sworn statements from his former employees. She gestured to a group of people standing at the side of the stage. These brave individuals have come forward to testify about Wellington's systematic attempt to discredit our foundation and specifically target Jack Reynolds. Cameras clicked rapidly as reporters scribbled in their notepads. Jack stood perfectly still, his military training helping him maintain composure even as his heart raced. But perhaps most telling, Eleanor continued, is this security footage. She nodded to someone off stage, and a screen lowered behind them. The video showed Wellington in his office, speaking to a reporter. The audio was crystal clear. Make up whatever you need to about Reynolds. I don't care if it's true. Just make him look bad enough that Whitmore has to cut ties. Her foundation is eating into my market share. The room erupted with questions. Eleanor raised her hand for silence. I didn't bring you here just to expose Mr. Wellington's corruption, though legal action is already in motion. She turned to face Jack. I'm here because a good man's honor was questioned, Jack Reynolds gave me his last $5 when he thought I was homeless. He didn't do it for recognition or reward. He did it because that's who he is." Lily squeezed her father's hand as Eleanor continued. "Since joining our foundation, Jack has helped create programs that have assisted over 200 veteran families. He's worked tirelessly, often long into the night, to ensure that those who served our country get the support they deserve. And when these false accusations emerged, his first thought wasn't for himself. It was for our foundation's reputation." Eleanor gestured for Jack to join her at the podium. He moved forward, his steps measured and deliberate. "I'd like to say something," Jack said, his voice rough with emotion but steady. "I've spent my life trying to live with honor. When these accusations came out, I ran away because I thought I was protecting others. I was wrong. Sometimes the honorable thing isn't walking away. It's standing your ground for what's right." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Reynolds, how does it feel to be vindicated?" Jack glanced at Lily, then at Eleanor. "Honestly, I'm grateful. Not just for clearing my name, but for having people in my life who believed in me even when I didn't believe in myself." Another reporter stood up. "Ms. Whitmore, will Mr. Reynolds be returning to his position at the foundation?" Eleanor smiled. "Actually, Jack will be taking on an expanded role. We're announcing today that he'll be serving as co-director of our National Veteran Initiatives program." The reporters began applauding, first a few, then the entire room. Jack felt Lily's arms wrap around him in a tight hug. Eleanor placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes shining with pride. As the applause continued, Jack remembered that cold morning when he'd given away his last $5. He'd trusted then that God would provide. Looking at the supportive faces around him, his daughter, Eleanor, the foundation staff who'd become like family, he realized that sometimes Providence worked in ways far beyond anything you could imagine. The cameras continued to flash as reporters stood, their applause a thunderous validation of truth over lies, of integrity over deceit. Jack Reynolds stood tall, no longer just a man who'd given away his last $5, but someone who'd found his way back to honor through the very act of losing everything. Eleanor stood at the podium, her shoulders straight and her voice clear as crystal. The evidence of the smear campaign's origins displayed on the screen behind her left no room for doubt. Jack watched from the side of the stage, still processing how thoroughly she had dismantled the lies that had sent him running. "And now," Eleanor said, her voice softening as she turned toward him, "I'd like to address something even more important than exposing deceit. I'd like to talk about second chances." The crowd of reporters fell silent. Jack felt Lily's hand slip into his, squeezing gently. "Jack Reynolds," Eleanor continued, "showed me genuine kindness when he thought I was just a homeless woman on the street. He gave his last $5 without hesitation, expecting nothing in return. That's the mark of true character, what someone does when they think no one is watching." Jack's throat tightened as Eleanor gestured for him to join her at the podium. His feet felt heavy as he walked across the stage, but Lily's gentle push gave him the courage he needed. "Mr. Reynolds," Eleanor said, turning to face him directly, "I'm not just here to clear your name. I'm here to offer you a position as co-director of the Eleanor Whitmore Foundation's Veterans Initiative." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jack blinked, certain he had misheard. "Co-director?" he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor smiled warmly. "Yes, you understand our veterans in a way I never could. Your insight, your compassion, and most importantly, your integrity. These are exactly what we need. Will you accept?" Jack looked out at the sea of faces. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed toward him like eager fingers, but all he could focus on was Lily, standing at the edge of the stage, her eyes shining with tears of joy and pride. He thought about all the veterans he'd met through Eleanor's foundation, men and women who'd served their country, only to find themselves struggling like he had, people who needed someone who truly understood their battles, both on and off the field. Jack cleared his throat, straightening his shoulders. "I would be honored, Miss Whitmore, but on one condition." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, curiosity dancing in her eyes. "And what's that?" "That we focus first on helping veterans with families, the ones who aren't just fighting for themselves, but for their children too." His voice grew stronger with each word. "I've been there. I know what it's like to choose between paying the heating bill and buying groceries, to watch your kids skip meals so you can eat. These families need more than just financial help. They need hope. Eleanor's smile widened. That's exactly why I want you as co-director, Jack. You see the whole picture. She extended her hand, and this time, Jack didn't hesitate. He shook it firmly, feeling not like a man receiving charity, but like an equal partner in something meaningful. The foundation staff, gathered at the back of the room, broke into applause. Jack recognized faces that had become familiar during his time there. People who had always treated him and Lily with kindness, even when he'd been just the driver. "Dad!" Lily called out, unable to contain herself any longer. She ran across the stage and threw her arms around him. "I'm so proud of you!" Jack held his daughter close, remembering all the time she'd been his strength when he thought he had none left. "Thank you for not letting me give up, sweetheart," he whispered. Eleanor stepped back to give them their moment, but Jack reached out and caught her hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Not just for clearing my name, but for seeing something in me I couldn't see in myself." "I didn't give you anything you didn't already have, Jack," Eleanor replied softly. "I just helped you remember who you are." The next hour passed in a blur of handshakes and congratulations. Foundation staff members approached with ideas and suggestions, their enthusiasm infectious. Jack found himself drawn into discussions about veteran housing initiatives, job training programs, and family support services. By late afternoon, Jack sat in what would be his new office, looking over proposals and program outlines. The space was simple but comfortable, with a window overlooking the Foundation's community garden. Lily had already claimed the small couch in the corner, doing her homework while occasionally offering her opinion on the documents he was reviewing. "Look at this one, Dad," she said, pointing to a file about a veterans mentoring program. "It's like what you did for Mr. Martinez at the trailer park, helping him with his disability paperwork. But you could do it on a bigger scale now." Jack picked up the file, memories flooding back of the countless times he'd helped fellow veterans navigate the complicated systems of post-service life. He'd done it because it was right, because he understood their struggles. Now, he had the resources to do so much more. Eleanor knocked softly on the open door. "How are you settling in?" "It feels..." Jack paused, searching for the right words. "It feels like coming home, in a way I never expected." "Good," Eleanor said, crossing the room to stand beside his desk. "Because I have your first official assignment as co-director. There's a veterans shelter across town that's about to lose its funding. I think you're exactly the person to figure out how we can help." Jack nodded, already reaching for a notepad. "I'll visit first thing tomorrow. Sometimes the best solutions come from listening to the people who need the help." "That's exactly why you're perfect for this role," Eleanor said, satisfaction evident in her voice. "You understand that true help isn't about throwing money at problems. It's about treating people with dignity and understanding their needs." Lily looked up from her homework, beaming. "Just like you taught me, Dad. Everyone deserves respect, no matter what their circumstances are." Jack felt warmth spread through his chest as he looked at his daughter. She'd grown so much in the past few months, not just in height, but in wisdom. Perhaps they both had. "Well then," he said, rolling up his sleeves, "let's get to work." The late autumn sun cast long shadows across the Foundation's newly opened Veterans Center. Jack stood at the entrance, his hand resting on the polished brass handle of the double doors. The building itself wasn't fancy. Eleanor had agreed with him that veterans would feel more comfortable in a place that felt welcoming rather than imposing. But it was solid, clean, and most importantly, it was ready to serve. Inside, a group of 20 veterans sat in comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Some fidgeted nervously, others stared at the floor, and a few watched Jack with cautious interest. He recognized that, look, he'd worn it himself not so long ago. "Morning, everyone," Jack said, keeping his voice casual as he stepped into the circle. "I'm Jack Reynolds. Like you, I served." He paused, letting that sink in. "And like some of you, I know what it's like to come home and feel lost." A few heads nodded. In the back, a younger veteran with tense shoulders relaxed slightly. "This isn't a charity," Jack continued, remembering his own initial resistance to help. "This is veterans helping veterans. We've got job training programs, housing assistance, and medical support. But most importantly, we've got each other." Mike, a former Marine who'd been homeless just 3 months ago, raised his hand. "Sir, I heard you were Special Forces?" Jack nodded slowly. 20 years. But that's not what matters here. What matters is that 6 months ago, I was working odd jobs, barely keeping a roof over my daughter's head. He let out a soft breath. Pride kept me from accepting help for a long time. Almost cost me everything. The room grew quieter. Even the nervous fidgeting stopped. Today, I'm not just accepting help. I'm offering it. And I'm telling you, there's no shame in either. Over the next hour, Jack listened as veterans shared their stories. Some spoke of nightmares that wouldn't fade, others of families they struggled to support. Each story resonated with pieces of his own journey. During the break, Jack noticed a veteran named Thomas hanging back, looking uncertain. The man's prosthetic leg caught the fluorescent light as he shifted his weight. "Coffee?" Jack offered, gesturing to the pot in the corner. Thomas nodded, following him. "Sir, I've been trying to find work for 2 years. Nobody wants to hire a disabled vet." Jack poured 2 cups. "I know a few companies that would disagree. Eleanor's foundation has partnerships with businesses that understand the value of veteran employees." He handed Thomas a cup. "But first, tell me what you'd like to do. What skills do you have?" "I was a mechanic in the Army. Always loved working with my hands." Jack smiled, remembering his own days at the auto shop. "We've got a program with Anderson's Auto Group. They're looking for skilled mechanics. Full benefits, flexible hours for VA appointments, and a team that includes other vets." Thomas's eyes lit up for the first time. "Really? Really? And there's more? We can help with housing while you get back on your feet." As the morning wore on, Jack met with each veteran individually. He connected them with resources, made calls to partner organizations, and most importantly, listened. Every story touched something deep inside him, the same pain he'd carried for so long. During lunch, Eleanor stopped by. She watched from the doorway as Jack helped a young veteran fill out job applications. "You've found your calling," she said softly when he joined her. Jack looked back at the room full of veterans. Some were laughing now, sharing stories over sandwiches. Others were already making plans to meet again, exchanging phone numbers and forming connections. "These men and women," Jack said, his voice thick with emotion, "they just need someone to believe in them, someone who understands." Eleanor touched his arm gently. "Like someone once believed in you?" Jack nodded, thinking of that cold morning when he'd given away his last $5. How that simple act of kindness had led him here. In the afternoon, Jack led a workshop on interview skills. He watched as veterans who'd been withdrawn and hesitant began to open up, sharing their experiences and supporting each other. The walls they'd built began to crack, letting in light and hope. One veteran, a woman named Sarah who'd served as a medic, approached him after the session. "Sir, I haven't felt this hopeful in years. Like maybe there's a future after all." Jack recognized the healing in her words. The same healing he'd found through helping others. His own war scars, both physical and emotional, seemed lighter somehow. As the day drew to a close, Jack stood in the empty room, looking at the circle of chairs. Each one represented a story, a struggle, a chance for redemption. He thought about his own journey, from giving away his last $5 to becoming someone who could truly make a difference. The purpose he'd been searching for hadn't been in the wealth or the position Eleanor had offered. It had been here all along, in the simple act of reaching back to help others up, in using his own pain and experience to light the way for those still finding their path. This was what healing looked like. Not the absence of scars, but the transformation of wounds into wisdom. Not the forgetting of pain, but the using of it to understand and help others. Jack walked to the window, watching as the last few veterans headed to their cars. They walked taller now, with more purpose. Tomorrow, they'd begin their new jobs, move into stable housing, or start their training programs. Small steps toward bigger changes. He thought of Lily, how proud she'd been when he accepted this position. She'd seen what he couldn't at first, that sometimes the greatest strength lies in helping others find theirs. A maintenance worker came in to clean, but Jack waved him off. "I've got this," he said, beginning to straighten the chairs himself. Each one he moved felt like setting another stone in the foundation of something meaningful, something that would last. In the quiet of the empty room, Jack finally understood. His military service had given him purpose once. Now, helping fellow veterans find their way home, not just to a physical place, but to themselves, that was his new mission. That was the purpose he'd been searching for all along. The moving truck rumbled to a stop in front of the small but well-kept house. Jack Reynolds stepped out of his pickup, taking in the sight of the white two-story home with its neat front yard and wraparound porch. It wasn't fancy, but it was worlds away from the cramped trailer they'd called home for so long. "Dad, look!" Lily called out, already racing up the walkway. "We have a porch swing!" Eleanor emerged from her car, clipboard in hand. The Foundation's housing program helps veterans transition into stable homes, she explained, though her tone made it clear this wasn't just business. The monthly payments are adjusted to income, and after 5 years, you'll own it outright. Jack swallowed hard, still getting used to accepting help. "Eleanor, don't you dare say it's too much," she interrupted with a gentle smile. "You've earned this, Jack, both of you have." The morning passed in a blur of activity. Foundation staff helped carry boxes and furniture, working alongside a group of veterans Jack had met through the program. The men shared knowing looks. They'd been where he was, proud soldiers learning to accept a helping hand. "Hey, Reynolds," called out Mike, a former Marine who'd been one of the first veterans Jack had helped place in a job. "Where do you want this couch?" Inside, Lily flitted from room to room, directing traffic with the authority of a general. "The bookshelf goes by the window," she instructed. "Mom's photos will get the perfect light there." Jack paused at that, watching his daughter arrange their few precious photographs. Sarah's smile beamed from the frames, and for the first time in years, the sight didn't bring just pain. There was peace, too, knowing she'd be proud of how far they'd come. By early afternoon, neighbors began dropping by. The Foundation had quietly spread the word about the housewarming, and people arrived with casseroles, plants, and warm welcomes. The small house, filled with conversation and laughter. Mrs. Martinez from next door brought her famous enchiladas. "Every home needs good neighbors," she declared, setting the dish on the kitchen counter. "And good food." Jack found himself in the backyard, grilling burgers with a group of veteran friends. They swapped stories, not of war this time, but of healing, of finding their way back to civilian life, of rebuilding families and futures. "Never thought I'd see you in an actual house, Jack," teased Tom, a former Army sergeant who now ran the Foundation's job training program. "Remember when you told me you'd never take charity?" Jack flipped a burger, chuckling. "Yeah, well, sometimes the hardest part of being strong is learning to accept help." Inside, Eleanor watched Lily showing off her new room to some girls from school. The teenager had insisted on keeping her modest furniture, but Eleanor had secretly arranged for new bedding and curtains in Lily's favorite colors. "Miss Whitmore," Lily said, suddenly appearing at her side. "Thank you, not just for the house, but for believing in Dad when he couldn't believe in himself." Eleanor pulled the girl into a hug. "Your father taught me more about genuine kindness than all my years of philanthropy," she replied softly. "That first $5 he gave me? He thought I was homeless, and it was all he had. That's the kind of man your father is." As evening approached, the gathering took on a quieter tone. Neighbors headed home with promises to return, leaving behind covered dishes and welcome cards. The veterans lingered longer, helping clean up, none of them in a hurry to end this moment of shared victory. "The Foundation's housing program is going to help so many families," Jack said to Eleanor as they stood in the kitchen. "I can't wait to get more veterans placed." "That's why you're perfect for this work," Eleanor responded. "You understand both sides now, the pride that makes it hard to accept help, and the strength it takes to finally do so." The last guest departed as the sun began to set, casting warm golden light across the front porch. Jack and Lily settled onto the porch swing, its gentle creaking a soothing rhythm in the quiet evening. "Remember that morning at the diner?" Lily asked, leaning against her father's shoulder. "When you gave away your last $5. Jack nodded, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange. "God works in mysterious ways, doesn't he?" "Maybe not so mysterious," Lily said thoughtfully. "You taught me that kindness matters more than money. And now look, we get to help other people find their way home, too." They sat in comfortable silence, the porch swing swaying gently. The weight of years of struggle seemed to lift with each creak of the chains, replaced by something Jack had almost forgotten: peace. This modest house with its wraparound porch wasn't just shelter. It was a symbol of how far they'd come, of pride surrendered and replaced with purpose. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest acts of faith start with just $5 and an open heart. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across their new front yard. But for the first time in years, Jack Reynolds wasn't worried about the darkness. He and Lily were finally home. The grand ballroom of the Veterans Memorial Center sparkled with soft golden lights. Hundreds of guests in formal attire filled the round tables, their quiet murmurs falling silent as Jack Reynolds approached the podium. He adjusted his perfectly tailored navy suit, a far cry from the threadbare one he'd worn to his first gala months ago. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edges of the wooden lectern. Public speaking had never been his strong suit, but tonight was different. Tonight, he had a story that needed telling. "Good evening," Jack began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "A few months ago, I woke up in my trailer with exactly $5 in my wallet." He paused, allowing the weight of those words to settle over the crowd. It was all I had left in the world. The silence in the room deepened. Even the servers paused their rounds, standing quietly at the edges of the room. My daughter, Lily, and I. Jack's eyes found her at the front table, sitting beside Eleanor. We were used to struggling, but that morning was different. Sometimes you hit a point where you can't see any way forward. He took a sip of water, remembering that cold morning with crystal clarity. Outside the diner where we usually got our coffee, I saw an elderly woman sitting on the ground. She looked cold, hungry, everything I was afraid of becoming. Jack's voice grew softer. "I had that $5 in my pocket. It was meant for Lily's breakfast." But something inside me said to give it away. A few knowing glances passed between audience members. Many had heard rumors of Eleanor's disguises, but few knew the full story. "I'd like to tell you I gave away that money because I'm a good person," Jack continued, a small smile playing at his lips. "But the truth is, I was terrified. Terrified of what would happen next. Terrified I was making a mistake. Yet something, call it faith, call it instinct, told me to trust." He gestured toward Eleanor, who sat with perfect posture, her eyes glistening. What I didn't know was that the homeless woman was Eleanor Whitmore, testing people's compassion. I didn't know she would pay for our breakfast that morning, or that she would show up at my door later that day with an offer that would change our lives. Jack paused, collecting his thoughts. But here's what I've learned since then. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness, even when it feels impossible, can multiply beyond your wildest dreams. That $5? It turned into a job at Eleanor's foundation. It turned into a chance to help other veterans find their way back from the edge. It turned into a new home for my daughter. His voice grew stronger as he continued. But more than that, it turned into purpose, into family, into proof that faith, in God, in humanity, in the power of simple kindness, isn't foolish after all. The audience sat transfixed. Jack could see several veterans he'd helped through the Foundation's programs, their faces reflecting understanding and shared experience. "Eleanor taught me something profound," Jack said, turning slightly to acknowledge her presence. "She showed me that true strength isn't about standing alone. It's about having the courage to let others in, to accept help when it's offered, to believe that your last $5 might just be the seed of something greater." He straightened his shoulders, emotion thick in his voice. "Today, I help run programs that support veterans and their families. Every time I meet someone struggling like I was, I remember that morning outside the diner. I remember what it feels like to give away your last dollar and trust that somehow, some way, things will work out." Jack's eyes swept across the room. That $5? It's helped fund housing for dozens of veteran families. It's provided educational opportunities for their children. It's created job training programs and mental health support services. But most importantly, it's shown me that when we have faith in ourselves, in each other, in something bigger than ourselves, miracles can happen. Tears began to fall freely among the audience members. Jack could see handkerchiefs being pulled from pockets, tissues being passed between tables. "I stand here tonight, not as someone special," Jack said, his voice growing gentle. "I'm just a man who gave away his last $5 and discovered that faith can multiply the smallest gesture into something beautiful beyond imagination." He turned toward Eleanor and Lily, both now standing. "Eleanor, you showed me what true compassion looks like. And Lily, my beautiful daughter, you never lost faith in me, even when I lost faith in myself." Jack stepped away from the podium, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you all for letting me share this story. But most of all, thank you for showing me that sometimes the end of your rope is really just the beginning of something extraordinary. The audience rose to their feet, applause thundering through the ballroom. Eleanor and Lily made their way to the stage, tears streaming down their faces. Jack opened his arms wide, and they fell into his embrace. The three of them stood there, holding each other as the applause continued to wash over them, a living testament to the power of faith, compassion, and the miraculous multiplication of one last $5 bill. The sight of their embrace on stage moved the audience even more deeply. Around the room, guests dabbed at their eyes, touched by the raw emotion and authenticity of the moment. They weren't just witnessing a speech's conclusion. They were seeing the living proof of how a simple act of kindness could transform lives in ways no one could have predicted. The morning sun painted the old diner's windows in warm golden light, just like it had that fateful winter day months ago. But this time, as Jack and Lily Reynolds walked through the jingling door, everything felt different. Jack wore a crisp, button-down shirt and pressed slacks instead of his old work clothes, while Lily's new backpack didn't have the worn patches and careful stitching of her old one. The same bell chimed above the door, but now its ring carried memories rather than worry. The aroma of coffee and pancakes wrapped around them like an old friend's embrace. Several of the regular customers nodded in recognition. They'd seen the news about Jack's work with the foundation. "Look, Dad," Lily whispered, pointing to their old booth by the window. "It's empty, just like it was waiting for us." Jack smiled, noting how the vinyl seats had been repaired since their last visit. The whole place had a fresher feel, though it maintained its comfortable, well-worn charm. They slid into the familiar seats, and Jack couldn't help but glance at the spot outside where Eleanor had once sat, pretending to be homeless. Sarah, the same waitress who had served them that day, approached with a warm smile. Her name tag was slightly less faded now, and she carried herself with the same friendly efficiency they remembered. "Well, if it isn't the Reynolds family," she beamed, pulling out her order pad. "It's been too long since you've graced us with your presence." "It sure has, Sarah," Jack replied, his voice carrying a warmth that came from genuine contentment rather than forced politeness. "How's Tommy doing in college?" Sarah's eyes lit up, surprised he remembered. "Just finished his first semester? That scholarship program your foundation started really made all the difference." While they chatted, Jack noticed a young man at the counter, probably in his early 20s, counting change with worried eyes. The boy wore a shabby military surplus jacket, and Jack recognized the subtle signs of a recently discharged veteran: the rigid posture, the watchful eyes, the way he sat facing the door. "2 breakfast specials, please, Sarah," Jack ordered, then gestured toward the young man. "And whatever he's having, put it on my tab." Lily watched her father with knowing eyes. She'd seen that look before, the one that said he recognized a fellow soldier in need. Their breakfast arrived steaming and generous: crispy hash browns, fluffy scrambled eggs, and pancakes that nearly floated off the plate. So different from that morning when they'd come in with empty stomachs and emptier pockets, expecting only water. While they ate, Jack kept glancing at the young veteran, who now sat staring at his plate in disbelief after Sarah had told him his meal was covered. The boy's shoulders had relaxed slightly, but Jack could see the pride warring with gratitude in his expression. He knew that battle all too well. Finishing their meal, Jack pulled out his wallet. This time, instead of finding a lone $5 bill, he had the means to be generous. He left a substantial tip for Sarah, then wrote something on the back of one of his foundation business cards. As they stood to leave, Jack approached the young man at the counter. "Marine Corps?" he asked quietly. The young man straightened instinctively. "Yes, sir. 2 tours." Jack placed his card on the counter. "When you're ready, come see us at the foundation. We've got a program specifically for veterans transitioning back to civilian life. No strings attached, just veterans helping veterans." The young man's eyes widened as he recognized Jack from the news. "Mr. Reynolds, take your time," Jack said gently. "We'll be there when you're ready." Walking toward the door with Lily, Jack felt a profound sense of rightness. The diner looked exactly the same as it had that winter morning. The same vinyl booths, the same coffee-stained counter, the same slightly crooked blinds. But everything else had changed, transformed by a simple act of kindness that had sparked an avalanche of grace. The morning sun warmed their faces as they stepped outside. Lily slipped her hand into her father's, something she'd started doing more often lately, no longer embarrassed to show affection for her dad in public. "Dad," Lily whispered, her voice soft with memory. "Remember when you gave away your last 5? Jack squeezed her hand, looking at the spot where Eleanor had once sat with her cardboard sign. He thought about the young veteran inside, about Sarah's son in college, about all the lives they'd touched through the foundation, about how one small act of faith had multiplied beyond anything he could have imagined. A gentle smile crossed his face as he replied, "It was never the end, it was the beginning." The diner's bell jingled one last time as the door swung shut behind them, its cheery sound echoing with the truth of second chances and the endless possibilities that arise from simple acts of kindness. They stood for a moment on the sidewalk, bathed in the morning light, their hearts as full as their bellies, before heading toward their car and whatever new adventures awaited them. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Reynolds, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.